Okay, we'll call to order the meeting, the May 7th meeting of the Santa Rosa City Council. Madam City Clerk, could we announce the roll call?
Let the record show that all council members are present.
Thank you. And I will, just for everyone in the chamber, item 15.3, our public hearing, that has been continued to May 28th. So if you're here to speak on item 15.3, it has been moved to May 28th. Madam City Attorney, comments on closed session?
Yes, the council met in closed session and discussed items 2.1 and 2.2. Both were conferences with the real property negotiator, and the council gave direction to the negotiator on both of those items.
Great, thank you. Item 6, we have several proclamations. Ms. Fleming, you have the first one for Water Awareness Month.
Thank you. Whereas water is essential for every living creature and is a precious and limited natural resource that must be stewarded wisely for future generations, and whereas the City of Santa Rosa is the purveyor of the water resource in the Santa Rosa community, and whereas the health of Santa Rosa's growing population and the welfare of our community depends on a reliable, high-quality water supply, and whereas, because water is a precious resource, wise use of water should be considered a way of life, and whereas Santa Rosa Water encourages citywide understanding and appreciation of the value of water efficiency, and whereas the Santa Rosa community has long demonstrated a commitment to using water wisely by minimizing water waste, installing over 56,000 water-efficient toilets and nearly 15,000 high-efficiency clothes washers, and converting 3.56 million square feet of lawn to low water use landscapes, and whereas the implementation of water use efficiency programs has resulted in an annual reduction of approximately 866 metric tons of greenhouse gases and 6,498 megawatt hours of energy, and whereas the City of Santa Rosa is the owner and operator of the regional water reuse system and is one of the largest recyclers of water, producing high-quality recycled water for many purposes, including irrigation parks, commercial businesses, and a community garden. And whereas for every drop of recycled water used, a drop of potable water is saved. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Tom Schwedhelm, Mayor of the City of Santa Rosa, on behalf of the entire City Council, encourage all citizens to use water wisely. There's never enough to waste, and proclaim May 2019 as Water Awareness Month. Oh, may I call forward Sean McNeil?
So Sean, if you could introduce yourself, and I know the next two items, what order do you want the items? We have a poster contest and a presentation. What's the most efficient way of, how would you like us to do this?
Great. Good afternoon, Mayor Schwedhelm and members of the council. My name is Sean McNeil. I'm the Deputy Director of Environmental Services in the Water Department, and I'm here today with Heather Avalos to talk about the poster contest and the award winners. So I think typically we like to do the poster contest first. We have the kids queued up and ready, and then afterwards it would be great if I could speak about each of the individual award winners and then have their come down for a picture to be taken together.
Okay, and Ms. Fleming, do you have those names or are you calling out the names?
I have the names.
Great, okay, go ahead, proceed.
Good afternoon, Mayor Schwedhelm and members of the council. My name is Heather Avalos. I am a water resources analyst with Santa Rosa Water. As you all know now, May is Water Awareness Month in the state of California. To celebrate Water Awareness Month and promote water conservation, each year, Santa Rosa Water holds a poster contest for the 3rd and 4th grade classes of Santa Rosa schools. I am proud to announce that this year is our 24th annual poster contest. We had 20 participating elementary schools hold a preliminary judging for over 2,000 posters submitted by their 3rd and 4th grade classes. The posters you see hanging behind you are the winners from each of those classes. Those posters will be used by Sonoma Water for the 2020 Water Awareness Month calendar. Our two final winners are here with us in the audience today, and I will show you their winning posters, and then they can come down to accept their certificate. This is our third grade winner, Maddie Azolino, who attends Madrone Elementary. Maddie had a very fun drawing that clearly demonstrated the theme of only rain should go down the drain. Here's Maddie. Our fourth grade winner is Brooklyn Sukup, who attends Austin Creek Elementary. Brooklyn's poster was full of color and clearly described the ways you can save water and save energy. Congratulations to Maddie and Brooklyn, you both did a great job. Finally, I would like to take a minute to invite the council and the members of our community to our annual Water Smart Expo. We will have over 15 interactive booths demonstrating gray water, rainwater harvesting, and we will be highlighting our free permit-ready landscape designs this year. We will also be raffling off a high-efficiency washer and a smart irrigation controller to 2 lucky Santa Rosa Water customers. The expo will be held on May 22nd at the Wednesday night market downtown at Old Courthouse Square from 5 p.m. to 8:30. I hope you all can join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Okay, so we also have our Water Efficiency Awards, and these are awards that are given to residences, businesses, and institutions that have really stepped up over the past year. The past year has seen a lot of change in our city, and so this year we have a lot of people who stepped up, and we want to recognize them all today, so bear with me here. So our first award winner is Willowan Rolls from Countryside Circle for a single-family residential award winner. Ms. Rolls participated in our Cash for Grass program by replacing a large area of turf in her front yard with a dry creek bed and beautiful low water use plants. We estimate a savings of nearly 50,000 gallons of water every year from this. We imagine its beauty will inspire similar changes in the community. This year in our large landscape, commercial, industrial, institutional sector, we'd like to recognize the Santa Rosa Junior College, and today to receive the award is David Liebman, who is the Energy and Sustainability Manager for the SRJC. SRJC replaced over 12,000 square feet of lawn with low water use plants for a project savings of nearly 216,000 gallons of water per year. And they are now working with a whole group of organizations setting up demonstration landscapes in some homes that the JC owns so that people can come and see what a living landscape might look like that uses low water use and is, so he's got a cadre of volunteers, the Native Plant Society, the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership, master gardeners, and students at the SRJC are all participating in this program. And our Commercial Industrial Institutional Indoor Water Use Award goes to Amy's Kitchen. And today we have Andy Berliner, the CEO and founder of Amy's Kitchen here, who's also Amy's dad. And Amy's has implemented an ambitious closed-loop chilled water system to treat and reuse the kitchen kettle deck cooling water, where the company's sauces and fillings are cooked and cooled. Our early results are showing a reduction of over 1 million gallons of average monthly water use, which is a 24% reduction in the gallons of water per pound of product that they're producing. And so, So our last two awards are related to the rebuild sector. First, we'd like to, new category this year is our Water Efficiency Program Champion as an individual. Pamela Van Helsema is a Coffee Strong block captain. Pamela has been a part of Coffee Strong and has created a strong collaborative relationship with the city that has allowed for open conversations regarding community concerns. This has helped the city better understand the struggles associated with rebuilding and work to develop a more immediate solutions for those people in this process. She's encouraged property owners to use landscape designs focusing on both water sustainability and neighborhood beautification, while also promoting gray water and rainwater catchment features. And then finally, another water efficiency program champion in the commercial division is APM Homes, and today we have John Allen, who's the Chief Operations Officer and Vice President. APM Homes has been helping fire survivors rebuild while being supportive of the Sonoma Marin Saving Water Partnership's landscape design template project. The project includes scalable landscape designs that emphasize low water use, fire-safer plants that meet all of the city's requirements, and APM Homes has hired a consultant and coordinated with the city to modify the templates for use in over 70 of their rebuild projects. They generously provided graphic design files for the city's use in creating architectural renderings that show the homeowners what each of these landscape template designs will look like once installed. And that is the conclusion. Thank you.
And you have a presentation also now? Nope, that's it. All right, thank you so much. Thank you all to the winners. It takes a whole community to save water. I appreciate that. Okay, Mr. Oliveras, I believe you have our next proclamation.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be issuing a proclamation for Peace Officer Memorial Day, and I would ask the chief and all other law enforcement personnel to come on down, and unless you're undercover, come on down and accept this proclamation. You would never know. Thank you. Whereas the President of the United States and Congress have designated May 15th as Peace Officer Memorial Day and the week in which May 15th falls as National Police Week, and whereas there are approximately 900,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the dedicated members of the San Jose Police Department who knowingly and willingly face the potential of injury, disability, or death for their bravery. And whereas every day peace officers face the threat of violence and danger by putting their lives on the line to defend the lives of those in the communities they serve, there are 50,000 to 60,000 assaults against law enforcement officers reported each year, resulting in an estimated 14,000 injuries. 163 police officers lost their lives in 2018. Between 2009 and 2019, 1,656 officers died in the line of duty. 165 officers were shot and killed between 2016 and 2018. To date this year, 35 officers have been killed while serving their communities. 15 of those deaths have been firearms related. And whereas Santa Rosa police officers recognize that the primary responsibility of their profession is the protection of the people within the jurisdiction of the United States through upholding laws, most important of which are the Constitution of the United States and the state constitution and the laws derived therefrom. And whereas it is important that all citizens know and understand the duties, responsibilities, hazards, and sacrifices of their law enforcement agencies, and that members of our law enforcement agencies recognize their mission to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression. And whereas it is critical that police officers and community members recognize and understand the importance of community-oriented policing to build partnerships with citizens of Santa Rosa to collaboratively problem-solve local concerns, maintain trust of the community, and proactively address the immediate conditions that give rise to public safety issues such as crime and social disorder. Now therefore be resolved that Tom Schwedhelm, Mayor of the City of Santa Rosa, on behalf of the entire City Council, does hereby proclaim May 15, 2019 and May 13 to 19, 2019 as Police Officer Memorial Day and Week. Chief.
Mayor, City Council members, I'd like to express my appreciation for recognizing Peace Officer Memorial Week, and especially recognizing the work that the men and women of Santa Rosa Police Department do on a daily basis, providing services to the community. As the proclamation said, the statistics are somewhat sobering, but with the support of the City Council as well as the City Manager when it comes to our training plans, the work we do, how we hire people, and the people that work for us, providing the services that we do, we try to keep this community safe as well as members of the Santa Rosa Police Department. So thank you for recognizing Peace Officer Memorial Week.
Thank you, Chief. I invite all my colleagues to come down and personally congratulate you as well.
I'm sorry, I did have one card. Is Dwayne DeWitt in the house? Sorry, Dwayne. This is for items 6, 1, 2, and 3.
Dwayne DeWitt, and I'm from Roseland within Santa Rosa. I wanted to thank some of those winners today for the water awareness, but they already left. Should have let me speak while they were still here. So the reason why is Roseland Creek is something that is dear to my heart, and perhaps yours now that the city owns a portion of it. Last year, you bought land at 1370 Burbank Avenue, and you got a portion of Roseland Creek. The creek has been a bit defiled, but folks are working on doing positive things there, and on the 20th of April, there was a Roseland Creek cleanup. Now, you probably didn't know, but the man from Amy's Kitchen also had his crew do a cleanup behind their facility further to the west on Roseland Creek. He just showed me a picture, and they pulled out about 12 yards worth of debris, which had washed down. We try to get it before it gets to that far, but sometimes you can't. I'm really hopeful that you folks at the city will begin to look at how you could be proactive on helping Roseland Creek be a water efficient situation with a riparian corridor restoration. You could get funding from the Sonoma County Water Agency. You could already be working on these things, but I know because of the fire and other issues, you may have other concerns. But I'd like to see this rise up a bit, and we in the community have been doing our part for over 20 years to help along that Roseland Creek. Now that you've got a portion of it, you could get in there and help us. We've always done it for free, always gotten the debris boxes donated, done everything we could. Now we'd like to have a bit of a collaborative effort with city staff. We've worked with Alistair Blyfus in the past from the Creek and Environmental Stewardship Program, but we need Recreation and Parks Department to step up and be more helpful too now. They actually have, I guess, the city ownership, if you will. The taxpayers own it, but their department has the oversight of it. So please bring that up to them, that a really nice water-aware situation, especially after such a wonderful wet winter we've had. We could have done better if we'd have had their help. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dwayne. Again, my apologies for not getting to you sooner. Staff briefings. Mr. City Manager, we have a fire recovery rebuild update.
Yes, we have one item to discuss tonight. Megan Bassinger is here to discuss the Cal Home process.
Good afternoon. I'm Megan Bassinger, Housing and Community Services Manager. The Housing Authority of the City of Santa Rosa applied for and received a Cal Home Disaster Assistance Grant in the amount of $1.2 million. Last spring, HCD, which is the California Department of Housing and Community Development, issued a notice of funding availability for up to $6 million statewide for disaster-affected areas. The Housing Authority applied for a grant for $1.2 million, which was proportionate to the amount of destroyed structures in Sonoma County. The program guidelines required that households be at or below 80% of area median income. They be owners at the time of fire. They have an identifiable gap in their rebuild, so the funds can only go to fill that gap. So the majority of funds need to be in place and the borrower needs to be ready to reconstruct at the time of application. And most importantly, the post-rehab value of the structure cannot exceed an amount identified by the California Department of Housing and Community Development. That is currently $633,000. And that needs to be confirmed via an appraisal at the time of completion. So we would verify that at the time of application to make sure the proposed structure would not be pushing up against that amount, and then we would again confirm that at the time of completion. The program has been rolled out to the Coffee Park area through public meetings, through Coffee Strong. We've also conducted outreach via the city's website. Next door, we are looking at additional outreach through direct mailings to property owners who have not started reconstruction yet. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the program that you may have.
Thank you, Megan. So far, how many applications do we have?
We've received one application.
One application, okay. Council, questions for Ms. Bassinger? No. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Any others, Mr. City Manager?
That's it for this evening.
Okay, want to roll into City Manager report. Do you have anything to share today?
Not today.
Okay, Madam City Attorney?
And not today either.
Okay. Council, any statements of abstention on any items on today's agenda? Seeing none. Mayors and council members' reports. Who would like to start? Anyone? Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just giving council a little bit of heads up on a number of different fronts. You might have seen a couple of articles related to SMART over the last couple of weeks. We did, in fact, complete a study on the feasibility of taking the SMART train east after we're done taking it north. That was funded by the state of California after the state asked SMART to consider that as a way to help relieve congestion on Highway 37, as well as to look at the state's master train plan. So that's moving forward. We received an update on that, and now we're asking the state for additional dollars to do the environmental and engineering work. The second thing on the SMART front is that the train is actively looking at whether or not to pursue an extension of Measure Q. That's the sales tax that helps fund the SMART train. As all of you know, it was passed right before the recession hit, and the dollars that were expected came up short. So the train has not finished its build out yet. By extending the tax, SMART feels like they can lower their bond repayment year over year, which would allow them to continue to build out faster to get up through Cloverdale. So you'll see those conversations moving forward, and at the same time, you'll see a conversation from Sonoma County Transportation Authority about the reauthorization of Measure M. Measure M is the local sales tax that we use as matching funds for state and federal projects. It's not anticipated that those two will move forward at the same time. SMART is eyeing the primary, the 2020 primary, which is March, and Measure M is looking at November of 2020. I've been working with city staff on the Measure M conversation to see what projects are currently in the pipeline that an extension or a reauthorization might be able to go towards. So if you do have input on that, I'm sure we'll bring it back to the council and have a full open discussion as well as this moves down the tracks. Let me know so we can start to do that. For example, I'll be pushing heavily on access to public transit and not just lowering the cost of public transit, but also increasing the frequency as we move through this process.
Thank you. Anyone else have a report? Ms. Fleming?
Yeah, the Water Advisory Council met this week, and the staff prepared a few items that they believe are in the public interest. The Water Agency has hired a consultant to prepare a regional water supply reliability study and analyze water supply variability and vulnerability due to climate change, disaster, regulatory requirements, and infrastructure. Phase 1 of development. And the work plan is scheduled to be complete by the fall of this year. Phase 2 is the decision of the development of the decision to support tool model, and is slated to begin in early 2020. Water supply conditions, the Water Agency staff provided an update. Both reservoirs are full, with Lake Sonoma just over 100% and our water supply pool at Lake Mendocino at 108% of the target storage curve. And then of particular interest is that PG&E is not going to relicense the Potter Valley project, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is soliciting interest for an applicant to take over their license. Interested applicants must submit their interest to FERC by the end of June. So far, no entity has come forward, although there may be interest by a consortium of Mendocino counties. It's critically important, not only as a hydroelectric energy project, but also as a water supply project, as the water diversions through the project supply water to Lake Mendocino, which provides water to supply to the communities in Mendocino and Sonoma County. Additionally, Congressman Huffman has convened an ad hoc of multiple counties, including Lake Mendocino and Humboldt, and the WAC, the TAC, and the groundwater sustainability and the water department are working closely on this. Thank you.
Great, and I just had two items. Councilmember Tibbetts and I last Thursday went to San Francisco, where the Nonprofit Housing Association in Northern California recognized the city of Santa Rosa for our efforts to try to pass Measure N. Although we only received 61.7%, we weren't successful, but it was I was very appreciative of their efforts to recognize Santa Rosa and the efforts that this council has been doing to address our housing situation. And also I think we made some nice connections with others in the Bay Area to continue this efforts, because I know, as we'll be talking with our next item, with our comprehensive housing priority, I think it was a good event to actually go and talk to some of the other folks, developers who are in the same boat as we are. And additionally, last Sunday was Cinco de Mayo, and it was the 12th annual Cinco de Mayo celebration in Roseland. And having been there when I was with the police department, the very first one, the evolution of it, what a wonderful community event. There was a packed house. I know the paper said about 10,000 folks, a lot of good food, good entertainment. So it was great to see such a wonderful community event. With that, we'll go to item 10.2, and this is to provide direction to me regarding the recommendation to the Sonoma County City Selection Committee special meeting scheduled for the 15th. And Madam City Clerk, do we still just have the one letter for the Coastal Commission from Windsor Council Member Deborah Fudge?
That's correct. Vice Mayor Deborah Fudge from Windsor is the only one who submitted a letter as of now.
Great, thank you. So I'm looking for direction from council. Mr. Tibbetts.
Direction or motion? Are you looking for a direction or motion? Direction?
Either way you want to do it.
I support.
Do we have a second on that? We have a motion and a second. All in favor? I've received my direction. We'll be supporting Vice Mayor Deb Fudge for that position. Thank you. Consent item, Mr. McGlynn.
Yes, item 12.1, resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Rosa approving the project list for fiscal year 2019-20 State of Good Repair Program. Item 12.2, resolution, general services agreement for document with Green Tara Incorporated Green Reproduction Services. Item 12.3, resolution bid award purchase order for 2019 compact hybrid SUVs. Item 12.4, resolution bid award sole manufacturer purchase order for 2020 Ford Police Interceptor SUVs. Item 12.5, resolution third amendment to solid waste collection services agreement, with Recology Sonoma Marin DBA Recology Santa Rosa.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Mr. Tibbetts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for Joey. At least I think it's Joey on 12.5.
Yes.
Hey, thanks. I'm sorry for not getting this question to you via email first, but one question I did have is, from reading this, it was hard to determine actually the fiscal impact to the user or the consumer or ratepayer, and I was hoping you could clarify that. Are there expected increases for these folks? What is it going to be compared to what it was?
So the expected increase is based on a combination of different indices that we look at year over year. So it's kind of hard at this point to tell you what would be the direct impact. With this change here in this agreement, essentially we're just moving one index from the other just to kind of make it a little more as it should be. So for instance, in the all other index, there was pension, health insurance, workers' compensation, and labor and subcontractor costs. Mm-hmm. We are actually going to be moving those to the labor index. So it's taking one and moving it from the other. It's essentially a wash for the ratepayers.
It's a wash. Are we sure of that?
95% sure.
Okay.
I could get back to you otherwise just to double check, but.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm probably going to either abstain from this one or wait for more information, because it would be really helpful for me to know the direct impact to ratepayers, and I'm acutely sensitive to it just because it's been such a big jump for them already, and I'm worried that the public's going to see these amendments as just kind of a couple more, cuts. So I want to be able to know what the cost impact is if I get a question.
Sure thing.
Just be able to tell them, hey, here's the cost to you additionally, and here's why. But thank you very much.
Happy to run some more details on that and get that to you.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for item 12.5? Thank you, Joey. Ms. Gomes, you had another question?
Hi, my question is in regard to 12.3 and 12.4, and I want to thank whoever did this. Thank you. I think this is the first time in a long time that we've seen a local car dealership awarded. And I'm wondering if you can clarify whether this was because of our local preference, or if they bid beyond, their bid was low enough that the local preference turned out not to be a factor. And if you can sort of let me know where we are in the process of making amendments to our local preference to be sure that this happens more frequently.
So I'll let Brandolyn handle the local preference. Once again, this is going to trail into the next conversation about priorities. We've had to significantly delay the purchasing manual as we try to wrestle with a whole series of staff issues that are coming really fast and furious. So again, that has to be handled first. Once the purchasing manual is updated, then we will be getting into the preference conversations that we need to address, but that event horizon is longer than this conversation.
Thank you for the reminder.
And if I could jump in, it did, just so you know, the local preference policy did pass unanimously from long-term finance, but then has been held up waiting for this other item.
I needed the update, thank you. Did they use the local preference to?
We, of course, always use the local preference when it's applicable in a bid process. I think to really respond to your question is more importantly, our job is really to promote bid visibility and ensure that as many vendors as possible, inclusive of that local element, are notified of the bid. And I'm not sure if council is aware, so I will remind them, back in 2014, right before my arrival, we instituted the use of an electronic bidding platform. And we've worked diligently to get all of our local bids, especially the formal ones, which is over $100,000 for goods and services, as a mandatory on that platform. So there's one cohesive place where you can find bid documents, as well as a vendor, be notified when bids are posted, which makes it a lot easier for local and non-local vendors alike to be bid visible, if you will. I'd like to turn your attention to 12.3 in the analysis section, where you will see on a regular basis that nearly, in this case, 173 vendors were notified throughout the region and sometimes nationally of a larger bid like this. And if you would look through at the actual response that we received, a total of 6 vendors downloaded the documents and identified themselves as prospective, but in this case, we only had 1 bid. So when there is 1 bid, we still apply the preference as a math equation to show that it is applicable, but therefore it doesn't really, codify.
Because we had the 1 bid.
Correct. And in the second one, you will see that in that award that there were 2 responses, of which the local preference was applied, but they were still the lowest intended respondee. I would also say too that to use a proverb, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And so we do our utmost diligence to ensure that the bid, and we try to reach out specifically to local vendors if we don't see them responding.
And I really want to thank you, because this is the first one I think I've seen that's been local in, 5 or 6 years. So I'm really grateful to see it. Thank you.
It is our absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Brandon, could you identify yourself and give your role with the city?
Of course, thanks. Apologies. I'm Brandon Trammell, the purchasing agent for the city of Santa Rosa.
Thank you. Council, any other questions on the consent calendar? Seeing none, we have a couple items, or a couple cards. George Uberti, followed by Dwayne DeWitt.
How are you? I'd like to talk to you about item 12.3 here. I guess I'm wondering exactly how it is y'all are receiving input. Like who told you that what the people of Santa Rosa want is for the police department to have 10 brand new cars? Because unless this is The Price is Right, nobody is excited about that. Nobody wants that. The people of Santa Rosa do not sit around and go, you know what we need to spend, millions of dollars on? Getting brand shiny new cars that look like Optimus Prime for the police force. They need to be 2019 absolutely, or I don't feel safe. Nobody thinks that. So the thing that you're doing when you're taking a bunch of things that nobody asked for, spending money on it, so the police already get a third of the general fund. I mean, if it's a third of the money that we have for the entire city to protect us, I mean, I think we need protection from whoever's got a third. Like, if the police don't get a third of the money, are we gonna lose a third of the money? Because they're not stopping what? Do you know, I mean, it doesn't make sense. It's a problem. It's an overvalue. We've way overestimated how valuable one very small group of people are. I'm guessing the people here at Hansel Toyota are one of those people, right? I don't think that's a representative sample of the city of Santa Rosa and what they want. What we sit around going, man, you know what I wish the city would do? 10 brand new cars for the police department, number 1 on my list. I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I don't think anybody in this room is deluded enough to actually believe that. All right? So if nobody wants it and nobody asked for it, and we're spending millions of dollars. We need to change that situation, right? I don't know where the avenues for input are, but my guess is that the police have a lot more access to them than the general public, right? And then, you know, I guess they also probably have all the guns and everything too, so that I guess makes it a lot easier to listen to them, right? I think we need to change that. I think what the city of Santa Rosa needs to do is take an active role in finding out what the people of this city are asking for, right? What do we want, okay? And how can you give it to us? Because this is ridiculous. It doesn't reflect us. It's not, nobody asked for it. Nobody wants it. And it's a waste. It's actively a waste. Our resources can be put to much, much better use, helping the people of this city out of the series of emergencies that your governing has put them in. All right? Please fix these things. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Dwayne DeWitt, followed by Eileen Bill.
Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt from Roseland. I'm a member of the Sonoma County Housing Advocacy Group, and they're always trying to find ways to cut costs. And on 12.5, my concerns were that the Recology contract, if you will, I looked at the numbers, and although the staff member said he believes it's not going to cost any more for the ratepayers, there's questions. People that live in apartments that don't have that as part of their rent, and they have to pay for their solid waste removal, and then people that have their own individual accounts, they want to be sure that the rates aren't going up. I talked with a man who was really also concerned about how when Recology took this on, they ended the free once-a-year small debris bin for everyone. And they also didn't really allow if you could just have it picked up once a month if you're the person that doesn't use, or I should restate that perhaps, a person that doesn't have a lot of solid waste. Many older people, they're able to just use one small garbage can and only fill it once a month. So I was looking into this, trying to find where that information was, and that's a dense Excel spreadsheet. It's kind of hard to figure where the savings are, if there are any savings, and I'm hoping that you perhaps could put this over and come back and answer Mr. Tibbetts' questions, which were quite good, and I believe staff was very vague in their answer, not specific. They're just like, oh yeah, we're going, but how do we know that? So thank you for your time. Please hold this over until another time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Eileen Bill.
Excuse me. Actually, I just had a question, and whether or not you buy the SUVs or not, and they may not have the same caliber, but I'm just wondering why you're going with hybrids instead of electric vehicles. Mostly I'm concerned about the planet, so if it's possible that they come in the electric form, I would certainly go for that. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other cards? Seeing none. Mr. Rogers, you have this calendar?
Yeah, so I'll make this easier for my council members, and I'll take items 12.1 and 12.4. I'll move items 12.1 and 12 through 12.4 and waive further reading of the text.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Your votes, please. And that passes unanimously.
And then I will move item 12.5 and waive further reading of the text.
Second.
Motion and a second. Your votes. That passes with 6 ayes and Mr. Tibbetts abstaining.
Can we request that someone speak with Ms. Bill about why we use hybrid instead of electric, just to make sure that she gets an answer to her question?
You making that request of the city manager?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, not being 5 o'clock yet, we'll move to report item 14.1. And just so council knows, we have 5 different priorities, so I've asked the city manager, we'll do each priority and then ask questions or solicit questions or comments from council as we go through it.
So Just as an introductory note, I have just received a request to be on a phone call at 5:30 with our partners at Cal OES and FEMA about an issue, and so I will be adjourning, and it's not anything to do with anything in the chamber. I just will need to take that phone call at 5:30 today. And it is an issue that we're wrestling with on the direct housing and trying to make sure those renter benefits are extended. What I will say is I want to give a thank you to the committee members that we met a few weeks ago with the ad hoc the mayor put together to review Tier 1 priorities and come up with a work plan. The work plan in front of you is an aggressive work plan. It does not take into consideration things that appear, and I'll point to one that was mentioned today. For example, the Potter Valley project. It does not take into consideration needs that the organization has to wrestle through, such as I mentioned earlier, the purchasing manual, which provides us opportunities down the line to actually have a more robust local preference policy, potentially addressing historically underutilized businesses. So I would just tell council that this is an aggressive timetable, and it's an aggressive schedule. It's gonna take staff commitment, but there are likely things that will appear, and we've heard some of them today, that will cause some reasons to rearrange this calendar. So one of the things that after council reviews this and gives its approval, the mayor and I have discussed a way for adjustments to be made based on council process, that once something is brought forward, staff has about 2 weeks to respond and rearrange the schedule, and then provide you with the impacts, because there will be impacts. Down here in the lower chamber with me are the departments that are mostly impacted by this, and so I will be asking those department heads to come forward and discuss certain things on the agenda. But I really want to thank the ad hoc and the public that turned out at that ad hoc meeting to voice their concerns, their questions, and their support for various items under discussion. So as council knows, there were, back in February, council established a Tier 1 priority and a Tier 2 priority listing. We will be discussing the Tier 1 tonight and the work plan associated with the Tier 1. So the first thing is, you're gonna notice is that what we're doing is dividing these by deliverable dates. They are end-of-month deliverable dates. There are some things that are now being updated as calendar items on future agenda lists. So to explain the discrepancy, this gives us a little bit of latitude to meet some dates without necessarily living by the date that appears on the calendar. So the first thing you'll notice is that this is an end of fiscal year date for financial sustainability. And one of the things that we're tasked with was establishing a balanced budget for fiscal year 1920 and future fiscal years. One of the things that Chief Financial Officer Chuck McBride presented to you was the ability of the council and staff to work with our partners and really actually achieve something that was pretty remarkable, which was the restoration of general fund policy to policy levels established before the fire. What we will be bringing forward in the budget process is not only a balanced budget, but a reduction scenario to enact $4 to $5 million in additional cuts that are required to get us on the track to having a balanced budget long term. The second item is to working with finance, although finance is the lead here, it's going to be a conversation with Public Works during the budget process to develop an infrastructure investment policy to deal with our assets, long-term and short-term. And then you'll also notice that there will be a discussion about pension obligation, which will include an overview of the PERS system and a request for action to invest about $4 million in remaining pension obligation funds to start to actually address the long-term liabilities associated with pension. By the end of August, we are proposing to come back with a spending plan on Measure M. The reason that this is being delayed a little bit is that that work is ongoing. We're in consultation with County Council on exactly how to establish the baseline for this investment, and there is a meeting tomorrow about programmatic endeavors around this particular resource. And the first meeting of the citizens oversight has yet to be held. So we will commit to bringing back a spending plan, and this will be an adjustment to the budget once we get a chance to understand fully the criteria involved with that. And that is obviously a conversation between Finance and Rec and Parks. By the end of the calendar year, we're proposing to review the general fund policy in light of the fires. Are we at the right percentage? Do we want to take a different approach to this? So we'll work through the long-term finance committee, but will ultimately reviewed by the entire council. And then by the end of the fiscal year, we're going to be taking on the task to review all potential policy alternatives to address upcoming economic uncertainty. So that's going to be a year-long process, again, working with the long-term finance committee.
All right, if we could just pause right there, see if there's any questions from council on Tier 1 priority financial stability. Seeing none, please continue.
So the next is the ongoing task in front of us on recovery and resiliency. The first item you'll see by the end of September. Yes?
I'm afraid I had organized myself based on the Appendix 2 or Attachment 2, and that's not organized in quite the same way. So can you just give a second for me to make sure that some of the items I want to ask about are not, they're not going to come through in exactly the same way. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I just needed a pause to catch up and make sure that I was coordinated the right way.
So one of the things we're hoping to do is have some more clarity this summer from our partners at this State Housing and Community Development around DR resources, and hope to bring back an implementation strategy by the end of September. What I will say is this is dependent upon HCD, state HCD, actually getting approval from the federal government and moving forward on their program that they have submitted to the federal government. So while this is a date we're shooting for, it does have the potential to move because there's some variables outside of our control. Also, you'll notice that by the end of October, we're in a process of moving forward fire and building codes. I'm going to have the chief discuss this a little bit so that he can give you exactly what we're shooting to do between now and the end of October.
Hello, Tony Gosner, Fire Chief for the City of Santa Rosa. So yes, we're in the process of doing fire and building code updates. Every 3 years, the codes come up for review and changes, and we are working diligently with other county partners as well as the city's building department moving forward. So on December, I believe it's December 1st, we're gonna have a public hearing on building codes. December 31st, it'll come back to you for approval. We have every opportunity. We're gonna have multiple study sessions, probably 2 or 3 study sessions, because we're tying it into the community wildfire protection plan as well. So they're running parallel with each other, but you guys will have plenty of time for opportunity, for input, to see if we want to change anything, make any of the restrictions a little bit more restrictive for building in a wildland-urban interface. That process should be concluded by the end of October for a January 1 implementation.
And you'll notice there, we have scheduled the first of those sessions to be on 7/16/19, and that is the first of 3 council sessions in addition to additional community work that we'll be doing around this plan.
If I could just add the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, we have a steering group that is comprised of people that live in Fountain Grove, Oakmont, the state, us clearly. There's 7 or 8 on the steering group that's going to be working with the consultant moving forward. There's going to be a lot of community outreach. It's a 3-year granting opportunity, meaning we need to get it done within the 3 years. Our plan is to be done within a year of today. So we have an aggressive timeline, and it's going to be a lot of community involvement moving forward with the CWPP.
And the next item is the public assistance program, and this is just to lay out the entire public assistance program in a presentation would have stopped us in our tracks, but we wanted to highlight some things that we need to move forward. One of them is the adoption of a site plan and schedule for our fire station rebuild. The second is a restoration of elements of our destroyed and damaged infrastructure. So there's a pledge to get by the end of this calendar year to complete Coffee Park reconstruction phase 1, open bicycle and pedestrian bridges along Parker Hill, and restore all street lighting that was damaged in the fires. There is also, we'll be moving forward with a variety of hazard mitigation grant programs, and we will bring forward those awarded projects and update you on delivery schedules associated with those hazard mitigation grant program. Additionally, you'll see that as the chief said, not only will the codes be adopted by the beginning of the calendar year, the final community wildfire protection plan is scheduled to be completed before the end of the fiscal year, which is again a very aggressive schedule. We are pledging to try to complete the entire Coffee Neighborhood Park Master Plan, which means reopen the park with all its amenities by the end of August of next year. And then we're pledging to try to get trying to get 90% of the destroyed properties into the rebuild process by the end of November of 2020. And then lastly, this is a date which will likely change based on the determination of when we actually get an approval of our investment strategy, but invest $38.4 million in multifamily units in a 5-year window, which is the prescribed window from the Department of Human Development in DC. So there's a lot that we have to understand more about what the restrictions and the requirements are going to be on those programs, but obviously that'll be an ongoing conversation with council, and we have a 5-year window to invest those funds in multifamily housing.
Okay, council, questions on Tier 1 priority recovery and resilience? Ms. Combs.
Thank you. I very much appreciate the speed with which we are moving forward on some items, and in particular appreciate the community wildfire protection plan coming forward. Thank you for that. I want to make sure within the context of the community wildfire discussion that we include people who are not only in the fire hazard areas. Many of us were affected by the fires. Whether our home burnt or not, there was still impact within the rest of the community. People lost their work in those areas. People lost their childcare in those areas, even if they didn't live there. So it concerned me to hear sort of a list of stakeholders that sounded as if it didn't include everyone in our community who really did have an impact, even if it wasn't that direct house burnt down impact. And, you know, we have raised taxes in part because of having fire losses. So the whole community is in the process of paying for the damage associated with the fires. So I just wanted to make sure that when we did community outreach, that included the whole community.
Yes, for us, when we do the community outreach, it'll be the entire city. There'll be multiple areas, whether you live in the wildland urban interface or not, it is a community meeting. So everyone will be invited.
Because I thought I heard a list of participants that was limited.
That was a steering committee that's helping usher the process through. So we do have a number of members, whether there's somebody on the steering committee that that is in the same predicament you're speaking of. I'm not sure. I can look into that. I'll work with the fire marshal and see if we can make some adjustments.
Yeah, I would just look for folks for whom there was a significant loss that is not directly living there kind of loss, because I know that we have people with those.
Yeah, I will say not everyone on the steering committee suffered a loss, but it's through multiple different stakeholders. So I hear you, and I'll take a look at it.
My second concern is item 7. I think it's 7. Is that the one with the 90%? I love the idea that we would like to have 90% of our homes completed. It's not showing up here. If you can move it to show, I think it was 7. Commit to entering 90% of properties into rebuild. That means they've taken out their building permit. And if they've taken out their building permit, the codes in place now are the codes that will apply to them. And yet our code conversation doesn't start until the month before in October. And
so just so you know, that's for 11/30/20. The codes will be adopted by the beginning of the calendar year. So this is, so just for point of reference.
I misread the 20 and was thinking 19, and I thought, boy, that's really fast. Okay. So can we clarify, while we're having that piece of the discussion, what the date is for the all-electric ready ordinance to come forward? Because my concern is to make sure that ordinance catches most people who are building in the future.
So we will be moving forward in that conversation. That's in the climate action conversation moving forward.
I consider it also a piece of this conversation, which is why I'm having a little trouble with it. When we get to that, can we confirm that it's coming when?
Well, there will be a date associated with that.
Okay, I may want to discuss that date.
Understood.
Okay.
Understood.
But I do apologize. I thought we were talking about like the end of this year, people would all have their permits, and I was surprised.
This is a pretty aggressive statement, even on number 7, I would suspect.
It is. So the code process we're talking about is the process for January of 2020. So it is going that rapidly.
Yes.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions? I had one, the completion of Coffee Park reconstruction phase 1, since I know I'll be asked this question, what does that entail by the end of this calendar year?
Yeah, it's our intention to, by the way, Jason Nutt, Transportation and Public Works Director. The phase 1 component is an effort to regrade the property, do our best to try to reinstall the play equipment and the turf in an effort to do winter protection on the property, and then we would come back and complete the other major components through the course of the remaining, through the course of the next year.
Great, and if this is approved today, will that information be on the Rec and Park website for that neighborhood?
I believe it's actually already up there today. We're right now soliciting for construction for contractors, so we're actively working on trying to get phase 1 underway.
Great, thank you. Mr. McGlynn, our next priority, comprehensive housing strategy.
Yes, so comprehensive, I think it's homeless is next.
All right, slide 2 had it, go ahead.
Yeah, my apologies. So by the end of the fiscal year, we're going to bring back some additional and one-time suggested investments. Right now, obviously, we're not in that presentation, but the idea is to bring some suggested one-time investments based on the feedback that we've gotten from the funds that we're working through the Leadership Council and their recommendations. So we're processing those recommendations and bringing back additional one-time investments based on the gaps from that funding opportunity. And then we also will be awarding our homeless service contract awards. Then by the end of August, we propose to bring back homeless service program outcomes. I'm going to have Director Gwine discuss that for just a moment.
Yes, Dave Gwine, Director of Housing and Community Services. So by the end of August, we'll have this current fiscal year data points of all of the City Council sponsored programs, and we'll be reporting on the results of the investment, and it may help inform our goals going forward for example, number of households housed annually, number of people entered into services. So we just don't have that data in time for the end of this fiscal year.
And then we'll be bringing back by the end of August a CHAP program review. There has been some discussion about use of city property in association with the CHAP program. In mid-July, we'll be bringing forward a new tool that you will get a little bit of a preview in the budget process around, but get a formal presentation about all city assets, and when I talk about property owned, so that we can start to move forward on disposition of that property or assignment of a purpose of that property. So we're working on a tool. We're shooting to mid-July to bring that tool forward, and then we'll have a follow-up conversation in August around the CHAP program and council's desires to see how that develops. So the commitment on homeless, by the end of the fiscal year, you'll see there are a series of criteria, and I'm going to have Director Gwine again address each of those criteria.
So this is staff's attempt to collect the different feedback we've gotten from both Sonoma County and the City Council on key measurements of the homeless service program. So A and B are the number of people housed and sheltered based on 2 years worth of data. And so in August, when we're in front of you with this current fiscal year's information and all the new investments you've done, more rapid rehousing, others, we may want to revisit these numbers to see if they might be more aspirational or whether we need to make any course corrections. Then there's been input on the Homeless Management Information System, HMIS. This is run by our colleagues at the Community Development Commission. What system performance measures should we be looking at? Because that current software program is designed just to meet the minimum of what HUD requires. But our community-wide, where there's more information we want to know about our program investments, and what would it take to plug that into one data portal? We would be coming back with a recommended metric to achieve those system performance measures for reducing first-time homelessness, length of time homeless, housing placements, and retention. We think in our discussions through the City Council and Sonoma County that those are key measurements. And so how do we build the system so that that's routine and folks can access it? And then lastly, there's many times requests for what reporting should be required by service providers. Is it monthly, quarterly, and what is the reporting format? So rather than have a service provider have a contract from one entity and another doing different reporting, might we have a standardized format? That would be the goal by the end of the year, working through Sonoma County.
And again, when you say the end of the year, the end of the fiscal year 2020?
Yes, June 3rd.
Yes.
Yes.
I just had a real quick question. When 5A and 5B, because on this metric we have both the City of Santa Rosa and Sonoma County. Obviously Sonoma County, there's only 2 of us out of the 9. So the 1,600 people in safe shelter, 325 people housed, is that just the city limits of Santa Rosa or countywide?
That number is currently just the city limits.
Okay.
So that's what I mean by maybe revisiting that.
And then when we look at C there,
yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the collaboration with Sonoma County, the CDC, and the City of Santa Rosa? Because my interest is, what does the City of Santa Rosa have control of?
That's true. I think our goal here by the end of the fiscal year is to have that one unit system measured collaboratively through the Sonoma County so that City Council, City of Petaluma, County Board of Supervisors are all looking at the same performance measures and can access the information. So we anticipate we have to platform additional software and data input tools into that system
Okay, and could I just offer one other potential metric for D is recidivism, because I know that's one of those metrics I think is real important, those that enter into housing and then for whatever reason go back into experiencing homelessness. Is that something that we could add to that list to try to capture that data?
Well, Mayor, yes, that was in our minds for retention. So we can change it to recidivism if you like.
Okay, great. Council, other questions? Ms. Fleming.
Thank you, Director Gwine. I have a couple of questions about when you say 600 people in safe shelter, can you speak to whether you mean 1,600 people served throughout the year or 1,600 individuals? So if a person comes in during a few different events of homelessness throughout a year, would that be, let's say it's 3 events, would that be 3 people, or are we looking at 1,600 individual people?
Those would be 1,600 people that came through Family Support Center or Samuel Jones Hall, and they may have been left the shelter but come back later. So that's one of the things we want to mine in our information is how many folks are having frequent visits, or if at all.
So it's 1,600 shelter stays, not 1,600 people sheltered?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And then when you say safe shelter, you did clarify what that included. And 325 people housed seems great, but rather ambitious. I'm curious if you could expand just a tiny bit on how you're going to fund that effort and execute it.
Well, that is part of, on the other slide, the homeless service contracts that you'll be reviewing in your budget process. But those folks that come through the homeless outreach service team that is combined with rapid rehousing dollars, landlord incentives. It's people that have traveled through the Samuel Jones Hall with that same resource. But you'll see the group that has the most success is families, and that's through the Family Support Center.
Okay, thank you.
Council, any other questions on this priority? Thank you, Dave. Continue.
So next is the comprehensive housing strategy. I'm gonna excuse myself, and I'm gonna let the person who's doing a lot of this work, Director Guin, walk you through some of these items.
All right, good afternoon, David Guin, Director of Planning and Economic Development. So the items we have listed here by June of next year, by the next June of this year, have the preferred alternatives for our downtown specific plan identified. So that's the first big step in terms of identifying where we're going with the downtown. A set of alternatives are going to be developed, and we'll have those identified and have a selection process on those. The second item there is an award of a public-private partnership technical advisory contract. This is a contract that's currently out on the street for bidding process, and that's going to be the individuals and company that helps us determine the feasibility of a public-private partnership to look at utilizing this city land for housing development and potentially relocating the city hall. And so that is the goal is to have that done by June of this year. By July, one of the things that came out in the legislative season last year was SB 35, which addresses density near transit. We as a local jurisdiction need to put design requirements, zoning codes amendments in place to facilitate that effort. And so our goal is to get that in place by July. We have had interest from developers wanting to utilize SB 35, and so we want to make sure we're ahead of that so they can utilize that rule. By August, the goal is to have the inclusionary housing ordinance in front of the City Council. This is part of the Housing Action Plan, one of the Housing Action Plan elements that have been underway for some time. And along with that, we're looking to try to bring a commercial linkage fee ordinance at the same time. So the point of bringing those together is to really address what the funding that comes from housing and commercial activities that go into support affordable housing to show the full picture of the affordable housing impact to the Housing Authority. The number 6 is a negotiation agreement approval for housing on city lots. One of the things that in the housing action plan and one of the council goals is to look at city lots to generate housing. So our goal is to identify those properties, which we have, go through a process of evaluation of what issues are on those lots and put those out for an RFP to see what type of development is possible. Ideally, we would get into a negotiation on those soon so we can have a conversation about what we can see on those properties, and we're hoping to do that by August. And then on number 7 is a award of the general plan contracts. This would be the contract to guide us through the next 3 years of updating the general plan. So getting that contract on board by August would allow us to get a start on that process this year. We've already started community conversations over the past, actually the first one is on Monday, I believe. And we have a series of 7 community conversations over the next few weeks to gather input from the community about what should be in the scope of work for this general plan that we would bring you as part of this contract. By September of this year, the goal would be to adopt the downtown specific plan. This is a key piece of the downtown housing strategy. By having this plan in place, again, that identifies what the community wants to see downtown. It would also provide CEQA analysis for that, which would allow development to happen per our guide, per what the city council and the public wants to see in the downtown area. So it's an important key piece of our downtown housing strategy. Number 9 is adopt a non-discrimination ordinance by September. And number 10 would be a rental inspection program, bringing a report to the council on that program. Number 11 would be part of the housing action plan as well. We're looking at our impact fees on a per square foot basis for affordable housing. This is something that has come up a number of times through various sources, but it's something that we're testing out in the downtown high-density residential multifamily incentive program. That is testing out a per square foot approach to affordable housing to see how that would work, and hopefully the goal was to gain guidance on that or input from that to see how we might do that citywide. By November, we hope to have our evaluation done of the public-private partnership analysis of the contract that we award over the next few months, and that would be a key decision point. This date is probably either going to be late, and we may need to look at, depending on the timing, if it's early in 2020, but the goal would be to have enough information for the city council to have a deliberation on what to do with moving forward on it with a P3 approach or looking at investment into our existing facilities, and that's a key point as we decide which direction to move. By June of next year, by the end of next fiscal year, the goal is to have a rental inspection program implemented and present the general plan alternatives. So similar to the downtown alternatives where we'll have multiple alternatives to review, the goal is to bring alternatives for the citywide general plan next year. And then by the end of next year, we have an ambitious goal to break ground of 500 new units downtown. So again, this is putting the stake out there to say we want to see these units built with the number of policies the city council put in place over the past year and the number of conversations that are currently ongoing. And with the specific plan in place, we're hoping that we can realize those units. And then by 2023, the goal is to have our 2050 general plan complete and adopted by the city council. And that completes the comprehensive housing strategies.
Wow, thank you for that presentation. Council, questions about any of this? See none? Thank you, David.
Okay, and we'll move on to the Climate Action Plan, which is the Climate Action Plan, which was already completed. Number 1, which is appoint a Climate Action Subcommittee. So this was done at the last council meeting. So we're in the process of setting up a subcommittee for that of the appointees, which is number 2. Our goal is to have that done much earlier than June, but we put that date in there as a placeholder, but we want to get that scheduled as soon as possible to start having important conversations about where we go with the Climate Action Plan. By August, the goal would be to have a study session report out on the cost of evergreen power in terms of implementing that citywide. Again, that's city-owned facilities, city-owned meters that we'd be applying that to. And then by October, the end of October, the goal would be to have an all-electric ready ordinance draft document for the council to review.
All right, thank you for that report. Council, any questions on the Climate Action Plan priority? Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Director. So with the all energy electric being scheduled for by the end of October, there's already been discussion about the building codes for the end of the year being implemented sooner. I understand that there might actually be some wiggle room on this date. Would it be possible to move that up consistent with having the discussion in the draft document for public input earlier in the year?
One of the goals and one of the reasons for having the subcommittee scheduled sooner is to have that conversation about what that all electric ready ordinance is, what that includes, because part of having a draft document is getting public input on any sort of ordinance change. So we would need to start scheduling public meetings about getting input about what impacts that would have. Before doing that, I want to the goal was to make sure that we understand what the building code energy requirements are going to be, what regional reach code efforts are underway, and then what an all electric ready ordinance would do. All those are going to take effort in one way or the other. So your question about can we leverage and tag team on both efforts, that's a conversation we want to have, but the goal is to have that, lay that all out for the subcommittee, identify what the impacts are going to be, the resources needed, and get direction from that subcommittee of which direction to move. So I hope I'm answering your question. I think there's more to that. I don't have all the information in front of me in terms of the reach code efforts and the building code information, but I'm prepared to bring that forward at the subcommittee.
Yeah, and mostly you answered the question. I think for me also, when I look at draft document by the end of October, what that tells me is that once we have that document, then we're going to open it up for additional public comment. What I'm asking is if we can have a draft of that policy earlier in the year for folks to be able to comment on it sooner.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think what this probably should say is a draft ordinance, essentially, is for you to act on, because the goal would be, the reason why it's in October and not earlier is because of that public process that we need to go through to get to a point where we have a draft ordinance for the council to review. So hopefully, yeah.
If I may, though, also is that these dates were discussed amongst the executive staff, amongst the departments. And so, yes, part of it is the public process that we need to go through, but this is also what's realistic that staff is able to produce by what time. So if you want to move that piece up, we may be looking at moving something else later.
Yeah, understood. And I know that we're, when we finish going through all of this, we're obviously going to have other items that are going to have the same discussion.
Yes.
My question really was about the status on here of the draft document, and hoping that instead what we're actually talking about is if it's going to be that late, adoption of a policy. Because I do believe once you put the draft document out there, there's less staff time for that, call it month or 2 months, where you're gathering input on it or people are submitting input on it, where that timeline doesn't get truncated regardless of when we start it.
And that is certainly a discussion that you can have. I know Sean is not able to be here right at the moment, but the words on this were selected, I believe, carefully, so that it was intended to be a draft by 10/31/19. Whether that's, you know, in other places it's adopt the ordinance by that time. So again, you know, unfortunately, the city manager's not able to be here right at the moment, but that's a discussion.
I can hear his comments already.
Yes, so that's a discussion that you can all have, but I just want to say, I don't think it was a mistake that it was written as a draft document.
And if I can just add too, because I have had conversations with the city manager, so I'll be the chair of the Climate Action Subcommittee, and I think as Director Guin said, our first conversation, we may say, we want to bump this up before anything else, because I, for one, will need an update. Okay, where are we? Because I know this is not a foreign topic to staff, so we get that updated, and I'm guessing the three of us will say, either, yeah, move it up here, what would be realistic, and then go to what the city attorney said. If we do want it by this date, there will be a consequence somewhere else on these. That's the way I would see after our first meeting.
Yeah, and I think you're answering my question in a way that is better understood. What I didn't want to have happen is, even if we were to have this discussion in the Climate Action Subcommittee, We've seen from other things that we've gotten work done at the subcommittee that once they come to the council, it still sits and waits for time. So I want to make sure that if we're going to have that conversation at the subcommittee level, there is the actual ability to talk about how we impact the broader council agenda.
Yes.
Mr. Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Guin, I'm sure there are all sorts of things that we would like to change the dates on in this. It is a very aggressive timeline, and I appreciate that, because if we don't have aggressive timelines, things can slow down. We did receive a couple of emails about this particular item, the all-electric ready ordinance, and one of the emails suggested or inferred that you would feel that that there wouldn't be a significant amount of staff time involved in producing this. Could you respond to that?
Yeah, I don't recall ever saying that it wouldn't take more staff time. I think one of the things that's important to remember is, again, as we talked about, a change in ordinance like this, a requirement that we put on construction and building and homing, it is a public process. So it does take staff time to set up those public meetings, make sure it's done correctly, because the last thing we want to do is bring an item to council that hasn't been properly vetted or provided input from the community. So it is going to take an enormous amount of staff time, and by that I mean drafting ordinances, seeing what other agencies are doing, understand best practices, how are we going to measure it, what's the end goal, how does that tie to the climate action plan, everything that is important that I think the council would want us to present, that's got to be prepared. And so part of what we're hoping to do is, again, and through the subcommittee, have that frank conversation, lay it out, get the clear direction, understand where the council wants to go with it, and then from there prioritize amongst all the rest of the city goals and how we move things forward. Because I do have to prioritize staff time depending on what the top priority is. So yes, it will take staff time. We feel like if we want to move forward with this all-electric ready ordinance the way it is now, this date is what it would take to get that done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Combs?
I just want to confirm that I understood what you just said, because it sounds to me as if the draft comes at 10/31, and then we start that process that you just described, which is a lengthy and time-intensive process. It pushes this ordinance back for adoption pretty far, and that is a concern. If we can go into the subcommittee meeting knowing what possible other options we might have, so that this is a final, a voting conversation on 10/31 instead of a introductory conversation on 10/31, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll be very clear at the subcommittee about what exactly a document is on what dates we can have that conversation. Thank you.
Mr. Tibbetts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting where we discussed a date for the minimum wage conversation, not seeing it in here. So what's the reason for that? What's the staff capacity to take that on right now?
So it's not in the packet. It's not a tier 1 priority, so it's not in the presentation. But if you do look at the schedule, it was included on the schedule. I'm trying to look for it.
Yes, the attachment 2, it is listed on that,
July
and I believe that
July
it is
16th.
July
16th.
Okay, good,
So
good. Okay, thank you, David.
Yep.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
So additionally, I did have a meeting earlier today with Sue. One of the items that we talked about that we removed in the priority setting, the goal setting, was the Open Government Task Force Implementation Committee's body of work. We did discuss sort of a realistic timeline of when that would be finished, just so that the public knows. We have a draft of the status report for all of the elements. We have a draft of the Sunshine Ordinance, and then we're about to have from staff the draft expenditure requirements to meet that ordinance. All 3 of those are going to be coming back. They'll be public soon, and then they'll be coming back to the committee for one last review about a month from next week. So that'll be available mid-June to be able to, assuming it gets approved from the subcommittee, to then come to the full council. So I just wanted to make sure that we also threw that one out there, because while not technically a tier 1 priority, the reason that was dropped off the priority list entirely was because the body of work was basically finished.
Right. Thank you for that update. Any other questions from council? Ms. Gomes?
I'm very interested and appreciative that the rental inspection program is showing on September 24th, but then it doesn't come back for a while. I think I'm seeing it coming back in 2020. Is that right? On June of 2020. It seems like a long time between when we first discuss it and when it comes back. Can someone, he may have left or be stepped out for a moment. Can someone explain why the long gap between we first see the rental inspection program and it returns to us? And I appreciate that that's a complex conversation. I just was surprised it was that long.
Yeah, so my understanding is that the September date, the first time the council would see that, would be a report to council on the program itself in terms of what that would be and what it would entail, the scope, and get input on that. And the time between implementation would be pulling that program together, getting the right staffing in place, hiring, getting the program up and running. So
that includes staffing up time?
Yeah, because it's definitely going to take resources to get that up and running.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Do we have any cards on this item, Daisy? Okay, we have George Aberti followed by Dwayne DeWitt.
It's like deja vu, you know? Like, you remember earlier I asked you, how do y'all receive input? And it turns out there is a way. I didn't hear anything in the tiers about getting brand new police cars every single year. It didn't come up. I guess nobody asked for that. But one thing I did hear was about our finances, you know? About keeping our finances together, about making our finances transparent, about making our finances directly connected to what the people of Santa Rosa want. You know, with the understanding that, you know, we're adults, we know what we want, and, you know, when we're capable of making decisions about what is best for us, right? And so I feel like this is, these tiers are a little bit, let's say, inefficient right now. You know, they're a very cumbersome way of receiving input. They move very slowly, right? I think we have all of the resources at our disposal to listen to the people that it is your charge to listen to, right? And to give those people what they want, right? This is not complicated. Your job is hard to the extent that you make it hard for yourself by not doing what the people that you represent need you to do. And what they need you to do is be a government. All right, and not a bunch of, you know, handing out cars to your friends. I mean, that it's like what a 10-year-old would do if I give him this job. You know, he'd be like, oh, I want shiny brand new ones. Grow up, all right? Grow up. Okay? I'm not asking you for anything that we haven't already paid for, all right? You're making decisions about tax money. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to us, all right? You owe us. That's how taxes work. That's what a government is. Clean the water, all right? Establish a public bank. Do your job, okay? Enough of this. Enough playing pretend. Enough giving presents to your friends, all right? Enough. It's ridiculous, okay? There's no amount of money that you can give any one private organization. It's not gonna change anything. It's not gonna make anything better. It's not gonna get me off your back. It's not going to get the people of this city are leaving. You are hemorrhaging residents, all right? You can't serve people that are running away from you for shelter in other places, all right? I'm not running anymore, okay? There's no running for me. There's nowhere I can go, all right? The only thing left to do is for you all to step up, is for you all to stop shoving the poorest people of this city around, all right? Stop bullying us. Stop denying us what we have already paid for. Be a government, and absolutely nothing short of that is going to stop us from coming here and demanding it of you. All right?
Dwayne DeWitt, followed by Kevin Conway.
Thank you, sir. My name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland. I would like to thank you for having done this exercise to lead to this report. I specifically wanted to focus on your goal to meet housing needs, where you state you're going to support housing for all through protection, preservation, and production of housing. I simply want you to preserve the houses that the city owns and not be destroying houses that are usable while we're in a housing crisis. I submitted a form that I was going to reference during public comment for you all to look at. I can't stay, so I'll just reference it right now and point something out based on what you've said, which is also in your draft to be approved tonight, and that's about preserving the housing stock. So listen to this, if you will. Room for all, both great and small. That's a nice little motto. It was from a conference 20 years ago about building houses, homes, and communities put on by the California Redevelopment Association and the California Association of Local Housing Finance Agencies. The reason I mention it is because just before that had happened, the Sonoma County Grand Jury had pointed out that here in Sonoma County, housing wasn't really being prioritized by the redevelopment agencies. The money was being set aside, but the housing wasn't being produced. So you've been talking about a renewal, enterprise district, and other approaches to try to get housing. The key is to save what you have and to also zone appropriately. If you looked at the map that was given to you from the proposed transit-oriented redevelopment project area in 2003, called Gateways, which bordered over on the Railroad Square area, and now your new approaches are taking in the Roseland Opportunity area. You could get housing in to a lot of places there by doing zoning. You can save the houses that are over there, and you can do a lot of positive things. One of the important things, though, is political will. And I point this out right now, because I can't stay much longer, that in your report, you've also been talking about open government task force efforts and different things of this nature. And you have the city manager write in here that when he offered opening comments, the report states the public has offered a very compelling list of priorities for the city to tackle. But nowhere in the report is that list available to us. There's no compilation of what the public offered you that day. That's the first step. Let the public see what we're talking about. Let us all share it. And let's save those houses in Roseland. Don't destroy them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dwayne. Kevin Conway, followed by Marty Bennett.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. First of all, I want to say thank you for the discussion that you've had tonight about the all-electric ready ordinance. I did make the request last week that that date in October be moved up. I mentioned, and I know that the staff has met with stakeholders about this issue. We were told that this would be an easy lift. We were told that the wording of the ordinance itself would not be complicated. And so I am here tonight to ask that that date be moved up. One of the reasons I'm asking is that on May 14th, 1 week from today, Director Guin, Nicole Trupiano, Aleka Seville, and Carolyn Glanton from the RCPA, and Rachel Kuykendall from Sonoma Clean Power, and the members of the Friends of the Climate Action Plan will be meeting to discuss this issue at length. There's a chance that when we talk this out and we all get on the same page and fully understand each other, there is a chance that the city staff would actually recommend that the date be moved up and that the ordinance could be passed sooner. And as I said, passing the ordinance would not preclude the council from taking any other action, whether that's looking at an all-electric reach code or understanding the new building codes. Both of these things can be done after passing an all-electric ready ordinance because much of the work has been done. But most importantly, passing the ordinance soon would allow many people right away to benefit from the opportunity to have an all-electric home if they want that, and avoid significant retrofitting costs if either they had to or wanted to do that in the years to come. So if it's not too much to ask, I just hope that that date would not be settled on tonight and can be rearranged in the allotted 2 weeks, and that the ordinance can be discussed much sooner. Thank you.
Thank you. Marty Bennett, followed by Jack Buckhorn.
Marty Bennett, co-chair, North Bay Jobs with Justice. We do see that the citywide minimum wage proposal is on your calendar for July 16th. I want to remind all council members there is a direct relationship between raising the wage floor and making housing affordable in this community. There's also a direct relationship between the climate action plan and in a city which is jobs rich, being able to diminish the number of workers who commute into this city because they can't afford to live here if we raise the wage floor. There's going to be minimal staff time required for this item. The UC Berkeley Labor Center has prepared a comprehensive report on the impacts of 15 citywide minimum in the North Bay. We have an excellent legal memo on the issues from the California League of Cities, and North Bay Jobs with Justice and the Labor Council and other advocates have prepared a model ordinance. The campaign is moving forward very rapidly. We have had 4 study sessions, and we've been working with 4 city councils and city staff in each one of those cities. We had a somewhat of a pause in Novato because they have been threatened with a lawsuit over redistricting, but we hope to restart that process in Novato quite soon. We were in the city of Sonoma last night that directed staff to work with our coalition and to come back with a final draft ordinance. We were in Petaluma where they had their study session on April 8th, where similarly the council unanimously directed staff to work with us to come back with a final draft ordinance. We believe that Petaluma will be the first city in the county to implement citywide minimum wage by 2020. That will likely be in late June. So by the time of your study session, July 16th, we should have one model ordinance in place. For us, as an advocacy group, it is tremendously challenging to try to coordinate 6 cities simultaneously to establish a regional wage floor higher than the state. Santa Rosa is somewhat behind. If this can be moved up some, we would be appreciative, but we definitely do not want it any later than July 16th. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Jack Buckhorn, followed by Anita LaFollette.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Sweathelms, council members, and city staff. My name is Jack Buckhorn. I'm the executive director of the North Bay Labor Council. And you have the opportunity to relieve poverty in this community, to help the working poor, to address the inequities and income that we see in our society and in our city. There's studies that have been proposed that have been published that show very clearly that after crisis, after like our fires, that inequity increases. It's harder for our citizens to be here. And it's not just housing, it's everything. It's very, very expensive to live here. It's even more expensive now that we've had these terrible fires. You have the power to address it, to bring dignity to those workers who simply want to work and raise their families, send their kids to school, maybe take them to get an ice cream once in a while, I don't know. They can't do that right now. They're struggling at a minimum wage job, and there are thousands in Santa Rosa that are struggling. The study that we propose will bring that data to you so you can see it and you can make an informed decision on how best to move forward with homelessness, with affordability for housing, with all the issues that you're dealing with on a tier 1. Excuse me for a second for being a little bit cynical. I have had study session items scheduled before this city council in the past and not have the study sessions. So I would plead with you, please don't let that happen this time. Please make it a date certain. Let us present the data, ask questions. We invite the entire community because this debate is too important. We have to have it. Business, workers, labor, social justice, all of you, this entire community, let's have this discussion because honestly, as Marty Bennett just mentioned, this addresses so many issues that are so critically important to us and moving forward. So I'll just stop it right there. Please make it a date certain. Thank you for putting it on a tentative schedule in the middle of July. Let's have that discussion. Let's move forward. Wall Street Journal on Monday. This isn't just in California, United States. This is happening across the globe. Workers are trying to get to 60% of median income. We're at about 35% in the United States, a little bit higher in California. If we go to 15 by 2020, we can help be on the cutting edge of this. Even though we're not on the cutting edge, we're kind of following right now, but you can do it. You have the power. Please help us address these inequity concerns in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Anita LaFollette, followed by Isabel Fisher.
Good evening, Anita LaFollette with Homeless Action. And I want to make a comment here. I really want to encourage you to listen to Homeless for Housing for All, because that's where we want to go with this. And I know you're mostly addressing those at Coffey Park, but just keep this in mind because you did say something about a rental inspection, and I wanted to point out to you that there are a lot of rentals available if you'll look around, not just right here downtown, but if you'll look at some of the listings for Berkshire Hathaway, Century 21, Alliance over on North Street, the Mountain View Villas over on Petaluma Hill Road, and some of the apartments for Ham Dulles are vacant. They have signs out. They've been out for, some of them for a year. You know, there are vacancies out there, so when you do this rental inspection, you might take a look at what looks to me to be gouging. Because anybody who has a place to live in this city with our emergency proclamation in order should be renting them, and they're not. And why is that? Because they want more money, and that's called gouging. They're not looking at how they can help people who have no homes, either because they were burned out or because they're homeless. It doesn't matter. They're still not renting them. Why is that? Why are there vacant units out there? Why are there signs up all over town? I tell you, because these developers want to make a lot of money because they have more developers back east who are investing a lot of money in real estate over here in California because it's very lucrative. There are a lot of us here, and we have fires. So take a look at some of the large developers who leave apartments vacant at the time they could be utilized for people who are homeless. Thank you.
Isabel Fisher.
Hello, my name is Isabel Fisher, and I am with the North Bay Organizing Project's Housing Task Force. I would like to request that the anti-income discrimination ordinance be moved up as an agenda item to the July 16th City Council meeting, which is the same meeting as we know that the $15 minimum wage will be an agenda item. According to attachment 2, the anti-income discrimination ordinance is scheduled to be an agenda item during the September 10th meeting, and I just really think that it should be discussed much sooner than that, especially since it is related to the $15 minimum wage. I grew up around here, and when I was looking for a place to rent, I can't tell you how many times I saw in postings, no Section 8, no HUD. So this is really important, and please consider moving it sooner. I would also like to request that the rental inspection program be moved up sooner than September 24th, which is when it is scheduled to be an agenda item. Also, please start budgeting for the rental inspection program now, as soon as possible, so that that gap of time that Councilmember Combs mentioned between the discussion and the implementation of the rental inspection program can be shorter. These very important housing concerns, the anti-income discrimination ordinance and the rental inspection program, should really be made a priority by being moved up to meetings that will happen sooner. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Those are all the cards we have. Mr. Sawyer, you have this item.
I do, thank you, Mayor. I'll introduce a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Rosa accepting and adopting the City Council and Executive Team Retreat Final Report and waive further reading.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Rogers.
No discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's what we're going to right now.
Yeah, I do. I want to appreciate the format that we have this in this year. I know in years past, my first two on council, it's been very difficult to tell the public when certain things are coming forward. And I know you've got the Roseland Library that is still out there that folks are wondering when we're going to have that discussion. That's now been pulled into a broader conversation as well. And I think giving some form of certainty to folks is really important in terms of making sure that they understand when our priorities are actually expected to be met. I am supportive of, if not just a date certain, moving up the $15 an hour minimum wage from the July 16th meeting. I think if we hit that date and have that study session on July 16th, we'll be coming in just short of a year after we unanimously added it to our agenda. Just this last week, there was an additional study that came out from the New York Times that I hope folks were watching. It defined what a high quality job that didn't require an advanced degree looked like, and it graphed it for all cities, major cities across the US against the cost of housing. And not too surprisingly, Santa Rosa was one of the worst ratios between high quality jobs without a degree and the cost of living here. In fact, in this national paper, it specifically called out Santa Rosa for how poor we do on that. So I am supportive of moving that up, if not sooner, then certainly making sure that we have some level of predictability for folks that that'll be on there on July 16th. Already made my comments on the all energy electric, and I want to make sure that we're also, again, not losing sight of the Open Government Task Force recommendations that will be coming forward. I think that those are an implied tier 1 priority for me, and I think for the council as well.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Ms. Combs.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing this forward. I don't recall that we've had like a year in review planning, and I very much appreciate seeing it. So I want to appreciate the mayor and appreciate staff that we've gotten to this point where we're actually knowing what we're going to be doing over the course of the year. It's really helpful. I want to express my support of the vice mayors and the members of the public who spoke for a date certain around the July 16th minimum wage ordinance. If we are not able to move it up, date certain would really help. I am aware of having seen things move, and I think that's a very important one. I also agree with the vice mayor. I'm looking forward to our discussion of the all-electric ready. Not having the open government show on the calendar is a concern. I hope that we can bring that forward. And I also support the concept that was raised during public comment that the non-discrimination ordinance come up, and that July 16th is a good date for that. If it is possible for us to move the non-discrimination ordinance to July 16th, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Councilor Mr. Tibbetts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also want to support bringing forward the minimum wage ordinance a little bit sooner. I think that it needs to be a conversation that is really grounded in a lot of research and community solicitation of input. And to Vice Mayor Rogers' point, if we start that on July 16th, that's going to get protracted. I also want to express my support for moving up the all-electric ready ordinance. You know, I've spoken with the advocates. I've done a little research myself on this issue, and we're talking less than $1,500, according to what I have found, to get a home all-electric ready. And if that's the financial consequence, I think that's pretty de minimis, especially when we look at baking that into a 30-year mortgage. And it would be important, I think, to capture as many units as possible. Now, if I'm wrong, I hope that the study session will prove that I'm wrong and we can get a good look at the financial implications, particularly to fire survivors. That's going to be important, and I'll be sensitive to that as well. But bringing that forward would be nice. On Section 8 and rental inspection, it's my understanding that Ms. Howard had pretty much gotten the rental inspection program pretty well developed, and it seemed, and I don't know why it was held up, but it would be nice to get that, as well as Section 8, particularly Section 8 in my mind. I mean, we look at what we're talking about doing here with homelessness. The people that I work with every day are coming to me saying, do you know anybody with a studio or a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom? I have this voucher and it's about to expire in 5 days or 5 weeks, and then they're waiting again for 6 more years. And I think that that one tool is so important and might have the most impact actually of all of our anti-homelessness initiatives. You know, and I recognize that I'm making a lot of requests up here that have impacts to time. So I also wanted just to recommend, and I don't know if this is helpful at all in the pursuit of, say, rental inspection being in housing and community services, that we put CHAP on the back burner. I want to try to give a little as I'm trying to take a lot. The only logic, that was an issue that I brought forward about 6 months ago, and the only reason why I'm asking is that that program just has not shown results. We wanted to bring it back to try to get better results, but 2 things have subsequently happened that I think are important. One is advocates were awarded $250,000 through Home Sonoma County. It's going to have a big impact, possibly larger than CHAP. And again, if I had to choose between rental inspection and Section 8 and CHAP, I think that across the whole population, inspections in Section 8 may have the best and most consequential impact for people living in poverty and homelessness.
Ms. Fleming?
Thank you. I want to thank the staff for all of your work on this and for the aggressive timetable. I do want to state my concern over the nebulous nature of the Home Sonoma County proposals. And you know, when we say 1,600 people, we don't mean 1,600 people, we mean 1,600 shelter stays. And when we say 1,600 people, it's not clear to me how many people we're currently getting in shelters. So I don't know if that would be an improvement or backsliding, frankly. And then I do really challenge our Department of Housing and Community Services to make good on a useful interface of HMIS. I know as a social worker that it's a valuable tool, and having that is really important. I want to echo what my fellow council members have said about the $15 minimum wage. Our working families simply can't wait. This is something that, you know, will put food on the table for families and children, and the sooner the better. It may not seem like much to many people who make well over that amount, but when you're struggling at the end of the month and you're deciding between rent and food for your kids, I mean, that's just something that we can't delay on any longer. And additionally, I really support the concept of not having a non-discrimination ordinance, and extending it beyond Section 8, but also including VASH and HOPWA vouchers, and making sure that there's no discrimination against any federally funded housing voucher within our city. So otherwise, I think this is fantastic.
Go ahead, Mr. Tibbetts, and then Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I apologize. I forgot to bring up, looking at the second attachment, I'm not seeing Roseland Library on here, even though that was in our Tier 2. To me, this is a very, actually, it'll be a difficult conversation in the sense it's revolving around budgets and the appropriation of money, but it's easy in the sense of time because that's all that it is. And so what I would ask is that on the June 30th date that we have here in front of us, when our budget items come forward from finance, that we list here that Roseland Community Library is going to be part of that discussion, so that the litany of advocates out there know that we're going to be taking a look at this during the budget.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
Just as a question, for the $15 an hour minimum wage, it's listed as finance, CAO, PED. I know obviously the attorney's office as well. Who would be the primary lead on that?
That'd be me. PED would be the lead.
Okay. Great, thank you.
So if I can just comment on some of this and just bring everyone on council back to the process that we've agreed to. And I've had conversations with the city manager, so I may be channeling some of what his thoughts were. So we went through the 2-day goal setting process, and the 7 of us prioritized our tier 1 priorities and gave direction to staff, and we wanted to identify some goals. And one of the big reasons why I thought it was real important, so A, we understand these are our priorities, you know, with the understanding all of us who've been here at any time realize we can't do everything for everyone, so we have to prioritize. What was so important about our meeting on April 22nd was staff, because we can want all we want, but if we don't have the staff capacity, nothing's going to be accomplished. And so that's what we did with our subcommittee, giving feedback. And I know the city manager now prioritized the feedback that he got from the subcommittee and offered us these priorities with these timelines. Anything that we do that's going to change that, quite frankly, I think we owe it to the staff and the city manager. If this is your timeline, if we approve that, any changes we want to make, I don't think we can take it out of context, because they looked at all these different challenges, all the things that we wanted, that the community wanted, and to rebalance it. So I would just really encourage my colleagues, if we start moving things around, because none of us are staff. There's a reason why these are in the orders that they are, and I think Director Goodwin mentioned just the all-electric ready ordinance, all the different steps that need to go by there. Our subject matter experts about staff capacity are our staff, as the city manager joining us. So I'd just be very, offer caution to start changing these dates, especially when we have a tier 2 priority. And I'm all for, you know, now we have a date specific for a 15-hour minimum wage on July 16th. If this council wanted it sooner than that, we probably should have made it a tier 1 priority. It didn't happen. We didn't. It's a tier 2 priority, and the city manager, I think, has heard us. It is a priority for us. It's not a tier 1 priority, and July 16th was the day to fit all these different pieces together. Because as also this council knows, we're in the middle of a reorganization. We've had some other staffing challenges with the city. All these are moving parts in a very dynamic situation. The phone call that the city manager just got off of was from some of our partners in Washington, D.C. and Sacramento. And I'm just very hesitant to start giving different dates without having all the information that the city manager and staff had as they're trying to balance what our desires are with the staff capacity. So, Ms. Combs, you had some comments?
I appreciate that caution, but I did hear 4 of us express concern about moving a couple of items on the agenda list. Can someone explain the process a little bit? Because
so if there's a request tonight, to move agenda, I will need to go back with staff and understand the corresponding consequences. That's why I started to open. I'm going to need a couple weeks to come back and say this is the change, and this is the consequence of that change, because again, it's the same departments doing the same work. We're not trying to get in the way of that, but again, it's a management issue. It's not just creating another council meeting to meet a goal. In fact, I'm going to be talking to the mayor directly about maybe staggering some of our boards and other meetings, because right now we're running from month to month on some of these meeting items, and we have little time to make progress that council wants to see. The mayor's not incorrect. We have transition. We're in the midst of a budget process that is going to be leading with financial sustainability. We will take the input. We'll bring back in a couple weeks the changes if council wants to have those changes, but I have to have an opportunity to concretely show you what's moving back. There may be consequences on things like the downtown specific plan. I'm going to call it out. That's an incredibly aggressive timetable. The staff has to be able to give this body material to deliberate over. It is our duty, that's part of the charter-driven mandate, is that we provide you information so you can deliberate. And that means we have to do research sometimes, that means we have to hold meetings sometimes. It may not be the favorite process of anyone involved, but we have to do that. And so there are consequences. We did our best to try to meet as many of these goals as possible. But if there's going to be change tonight, we're going to need some time to go back and reorder and show you what the impacts are going to be. We're willing to do that in a couple of weeks, but we also have budget coming up, so I want to make clear that that's got to be a priority. But we'll come back in a couple of weeks and say, if we move this around, we move this up, this is going to be the consequence. But there's going to be some consequence even in that discussion, because that's going to delay some of the forward momentum. Happy to do it. Happy to take some direction on some items that you want to come forward, but there is going to be some consequence to maneuvering those particular items.
I'm always appreciative of your happiness to work with us. I did hear concern about 4 items from 4 of us. And one of them was ensuring that the July 16th had a date certain, and if possible, moving it forward. One of them was moving up the all-electric ready to the July 16 meeting. I thought that's what I heard. One of them was moving up the non-discrimination ordinance, and my recollection was that one of them involved open government. Now, that's my list. That's how I'm remembering them, simply because open government isn't showing anywhere. I don't want to put us into a cycle of coming back to talk about this calendar over and over again. I understand we have a motion and a second on the floor. I am trying to sort out what our process is. And that was the root of my question. If we vote for the motion and the second that is on the floor, do we lose the information that at least 4 of us have asked to move some items forward as much as possible, or do we have to vote no on this one in order to get those items moved forward?
The items that are outlined, we can come back, and as I said, in 2 weeks, we can say this is where we could potentially move it forward, and this is the consequence to the overall schedule by moving that forward. And I can commit to that. I can get the team to look at that. That's absolutely doable. That won't be lost in this translation, but we do need to get to some of these conversations, because that is the challenge, right? And again, what I'm going to say is, in 2 weeks, there could be a lot of other pressures that manifest themselves that are complicating the calendar already. We're going to come back and we're going to update the calendar, probably as an informational item, unless council wants to get in deeper discussion. Okay. But I can commit to taking the 4 items outlined here, and we'll come back and say, if we moved it forward, this is what would move back in the calendar. There's no issue on that.
I would be delighted to have that conversation and to support the motion as it's made, unless I hear something else from one of my colleagues, because I want to move us forward without delay. But I do support moving these items. I will also, as an aside, we're moving this forward. I understand. One of the tier 2 items is childcare. I have sat on this council for a 2-year period in which childcare was in fact a tier 1 item and was never discussed. So I just am throwing out there that yet again, childcare has no place on this agenda. My priorities are not there right this minute. I understand that. But I don't want to go through another 2-year period in which childcare is not even discussed at this level. So that's just an aside. Put it in your back pocket. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, and quite frankly, that's why I asked who was going to lead on the $15 minimum wage, which department, is because I can see a lot of head on the tier list, but in particular, in the upcoming meetings. So I do appreciate the amount of work that's going through planning and economic development that David in particular is doing and his team. I think where there's a little bit of a disconnect, and I think it'd be helpful for us understanding how much work having a study session on something that is a report that is already done, that other cities have already done staff reports on. I think that that's where some of the disconnect comes in, is having the discussion without having to derail everything else that we're doing.
Again, just because another city has done a staff report on an item does not mean that your staff has looked at that item and reviewed it. So I would be reticent to say that we would be comfortable always advancing a staff report from another city. I understand that other cities have done some things. Other cities are not in full disaster recovery items as well. So I understand the urge, but I also say, again, staff is here to provide you with material to deliberate on. I can't comment on the work or the work product of another city without having staff look at that work product and review and say, what steps did they take to get here?
Understood, and we've had the discussion about in our budget shortfalls, whether or not we need to move our potholes from 48-hour fill to 72-hour fill. As a council member who understands the necessity for staff time, I'm willing to do some research on my own. I've already read the report. I've read some of the staff reports. I don't need you to necessarily always come out there and do our own thing. It's perfectly acceptable for me to have the discussion where you say, this is what other cities have said. Feel free to poke holes in it. Feel free to do your own research. I don't necessarily need us to go down that rabbit hole for the discussion, but understanding staff's limited capacity means that my expectations on the information provided from staff is not, I'm going to be a little bit more lenient.
And I understand, but I'm not sure that I can guide everybody to one issue that everyone's going to be lenient on every issue. So again, I think it's going to depend on the issue and the council's members' perspective on that issue. That's why we're here, is to provide you with the information to deliberate. I know that there are a lot of folks who feel like that they have the solution and are passionate about that solution. We want to make sure that they get heard. We tried to propose a schedule that allowed that and allowed us to do some of the work that staff needed to do. We'll take these 4 items back. We'll see what we can bring forward. I would say even on, for example, in open government, we're looking at other cities to try to understand some of the desires in that particular item, because we have to price that, we have to understand what others done, because there may be, to your point, council member, there may be opportunities that we haven't thought of to meet that goal, but that requires some research and understanding what other communities have done to meet that. Have they done it, and what have they done to meet it? So again, I understand the desire and the urge, but I'm going to point back to the charter. You employ us to provide you with the information so that you can deliberate. And part of the challenge is 7 folks wanting to deliberate and what each of you need in that information. So I understand the desire. We are trying to find pathways here to try to meet some of that need and not spend too much time on an issue, but enough that you feel like you have information to deliberate on it.
Ms. Fleming.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to give a couple of quick comments about the process here. I know that this may feel Kafkaesque and frustrating at moments, but here's what I think is working, is that we had a robust goal-setting community meeting. It was so robust that we couldn't all fit in the room together, and that we did come back and we have these goals presented, and the community comes out and they show us their opinion and their support for different things. And so while it might be frustrating, time-consuming, this is one of the side effects of democracy in action, is that, we do respond to our constituents and that we do take their needs into account. And I know that that can be difficult and frustrating, but I don't think we do it without awareness that it puts a burden on you and your staff, and we're very appreciative of that. The other comment I want to make is about the tier system, in that we are limited to a certain number of, we limit ourselves to a certain number of tiers. Tier 1 priorities tend to be very visionary, things that are we're not going to solve climate change this year or homelessness this year. I hope we do, but we don't. What we put on that is big aspirational goals. And on tier 2, we put things that are really important and fairly straightforward. It doesn't mean that they're not any less really important in some cases than tier 1 goals. I mean, sometimes tier 2 goals like childcare, that's a huge thing, but funding the Roseland Library or a $15 minimum wage, these are things that we don't, or I'll speak for myself, that I don't think have the gravitas or the breadth to make it to a tier 1 priority. So some of our pushing comes from the fact that something might be really important while not making it to that status.
Mr. Tibbetts.
Thanks, Mayor. Again, I want to just offer a solution and a path forward. And let me preface this by saying, somebody up here said it earlier, the fact that we have dates is amazing. And I'm not even going to hold staff to all these dates because I know things happen, they get in the way, but I am so grateful that we have dates. And in talking about moving these issues a little bit more forward, again, I didn't hear feedback on CHAP. I don't know, Director Gwine, how much staff time's already gone into looking at the other CHAP possibilities, but if that work product hasn't taken up a lot of your time already, I would be supportive of seeing, for example, Section 8 going into Gwine's shop, dropping CHAP, so now we've got, in theory, maybe some time saved, and then having the minimum wage come forward on July 16th. But David, if you're going to be running point on that, I disagree slightly and respectfully to Vice Mayor Rogers. I doubt I'm going to be able to walk into that room on July 16th and say, hey, here's another city ordinance, looks good, let's adopt it. We're talking about a big decision that's going to have impacts to people's bottom lines, positive or negative, and we need to have an input gathering endeavor. And I think that the Economic Development Subcommittee, if we can get quorum, would be a great committee to take that on to hopefully alleviate some of your workload and do exactly what Vice Mayor Rogers said, which is
to be clear, it's not an ordinance. It's a study session on a report.
I understand that, but to your previous point, it's like this, it's going to potentially lead to an ordinance. That's the purpose of the study session. And as the advocates have pointed out, I mean, the 2023 is going to be phased in before we know it. So if we're going to actually take the time to look at it, let's do it. Let's get the Economic Development Subcommittee on it sooner as opposed to later. Start talking to workers, looking at research, and talking to business owners to understand what would work for this city.
So with that, we have a motion and a second. So I'll ask for your votes. We already took public comment, and that passes 6 ayes and 1 no, the 1 no by Ms. Fleming. Thank you for the presentation. Oh, could we reset? Your votes again. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, do we have, going back to item 13? Okay, item 13, public comment. First speaker, Holly Hem, followed by Keith McCoy.
Good evening. I'm a Santa Rosa resident, a nutritionist, health educator, and a mother. I would like more protection for our children at school, in parks, and in residential areas from small cell 4G and 5G wireless. In 2004, the International Association of Firefighters' position on locating cell towers, commercial wireless infrastructure on fire department facilities, as adopted by its membership in 2004, is that they oppose the use of fire stations as base stations for towers or antennas for the connection of cell phone transmissions until a study with the highest scientific merit and integrity on health effects of exposure to low-intensity RF MW radiation is conducted, and it is proven that such sightings are not hazardous to the health of our members. and California Senate Bill 649 that was initiated in 2017 with a section specifically about not having cell phone small cell towers at fire department facilities. And although this Senate bill was vetoed by Governor Brown at the time, the International Firefighters Association is very powerful and obviously doesn't want small cell towers at their facilities. The state clearly honors the sacrifice of California's firefighters and is concerned about the health risks they face from cell towers. After all, it granted them an exemption on this Senate bill, even though it was vetoed. And yet, firefighters are the strongest of the strong. And what does that imply for the rest of us, and especially for our children, who I'm very concerned about? And just this month, Sprint shut off a 5G cell phone tower that was placed at a Weston Elementary School in Ripon, California, which was near Modesto. Parents pressured the school to have it removed when 4 children and 3 teachers developed cancer and/or leukemia since the tower was put up. The Ripon City Council adopted a wireless service ordinance with preferences for placing new wireless equipment at least 500 feet away from a school or homes. I would like the same protection for our children in Santa Rosa while they are at school, playing in parks, and at home in residential neighborhoods. And although I understand that we have a pause, it's also my understanding that soon permit applications will be coming in from cell phone telecommunications companies, and I definitely want to have things in place and be proactive about protecting our children in residential neighborhoods, at parks, and while they're at school. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith McCoy, followed by Dwayne DeWitt. I think Dwayne is gone. So next would be Riley Meisenborn after Keith. Is Keith here? Seeing no Keith, no Dwayne. Riley Weisenborn? Seeing no movement. Dina Bernard?
Hello, Santa Rosa City Council. Thank you for listening to my request last week to hear the response from the city attorney regarding utilizing the recent 2019 California Supreme Court precedent with T-Mobile versus San Francisco to support our city in establishing zoning ordinances that protect our residential neighborhoods from cell tower installations. Sonoma, Petaluma, and Sebastopol have been able to set those zoning protections with that legal precedent. So I'm thrilled that our city can now do what I know it intended to do with the pause enacted last year. I heard City Attorney Sue Gallagher respond last week that she is sending you a report regarding her assessment of this information. However, I also thought I heard her say her understanding was that the Supreme Court decision referred to aesthetic conditions. Fortunately, the decision affirms the authority and policing powers of local governments per the California Constitution to regulate utilities. This important decision goes beyond aesthetics as a local regulatory issue. The decision includes a discussion of what it means to incommode in Public Utilities Code section 7901. Incommode is a critical word regarding use and access of public rights-of-way and close proximity microwave radiation antenna installations in the public rights-of-way. Previously, the California Public Utilities Code and utility companies has consistently claimed sole jurisdiction and denied that local governments had the authority to adopt or enforce ordinances. This California Supreme Court decision recently disagreed with that premise. These are excerpts from the California Supreme Court decision that support our jurisdiction in this matter. The decision stated that we also disagree with plaintiffs' contention that section 7901's incommode clause limits their right to construct telephone lines only if the installed lines and equipment would obstruct the path of travel. Contrary to plaintiffs' argument, the incommode clause need not be read so narrowly. As the Court of Appeal noted, the word incommode means to give inconvenience to or distress, to disturb. Obstructing the path of travel is one way that telephone lines could disturb or give inconvenience to public road use. But travel is not the sole use of public roads. The other uses may be incommoded beyond the obstruction of travel. For example, lines or equipment might generate noise, cause negative health consequences, or create safety concerns. All of these impacts could disturb public road use or disturb its quiet enjoyment. Among the Public Utility Code's express priorities regarding wireless facility construction is that the public health, safety, welfare, and zoning concerns of local government are addressed. I can't see, baby. Therefore, the summary decision shares that it is eminently reasonable that a local government may regulate other longer-term impacts that might incommode public road use under Section 7901. This is great news, my honorable City Council. I've included more details and citations with Julie Guzzi for you to review. I look forward to hearing back from you regarding this exciting new development and our powers to protect our residential neighborhoods. Thank you for your care, concern, and attention in this matter. Ooh, I made it.
Thank you. Elizabeth Nealon, followed by Emery Dan.
Hi there. Yeah, I am glad to see you. I talked to the people at the San Rafael Transit Mall about the hours that their bathrooms are open, and it's 5 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. every day of the week. So they got you guys beat by a long shot down there. I was sitting in Courthouse Square, and a man came up with a scarf over his face, and he said, they sprayed here this morning a few hours ago, and apparently they are spraying pesticides to keep little plants from growing through cracks, and I just think that's outrageous, you know, spreading pesticides around. Where do you think they go when they're done doing their killing? Yeah, and then I was in Franklin Park, and I found this public notice pesticide application, May 2nd and 3rd, 7:30 a.m. to 3 p.m., location shrub beds, tree wells. Yeah, pest being control, weeds, and the product used Suppress EC Organic, and please stay out of treated areas until dry, or 3:30 p.m. This was on the ground, wherever they posted it. I just happened to find it on the ground. I have a friend who was harassed by a police officer in a certain strange way. The officer's name, I usually don't know their names, but in this particular case, my friend knew the name as Officer T. Robert. My friend was playing with his 13-year-old service dog. He was playing Frisbee in Courthouse Square, and I'm not sure if he got 2 citations or just 1 for having his service dog off the leash. But the really disturbing thing is that the officer said to him, "This square is for businesses and events. It's not for people to play in." Now that is one absurd idea, and I think it needs to be weeded out of that. Anyway, I don't think I brought my funny song up here with me, so let's see, I have 29 seconds left. I agree with the woman about the cell towers. I personally am allergic to my cell phone. I've had one since my first grandson, my only grandson, was born 15 years ago, and I personally don't like putting it to my head. That it can cause all kinds of symptoms in my jaw and my brain, but even like texting or holding it, my fingertips get numb. So thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Emery Dan.
Hello, I want to thank the council for this public forum. I don't want small cell towers in my residential area. I've lived in the junior college area for over 30 years. I worked for the city of Santa Rosa for 34. But on our block, we have one telephone pole, and it's 25 feet away from our bedroom. And to have that going with the 5G or 4G or the energy that will be radiation is really beyond what we can tolerate, health-wise and otherwise. We're not against technology, but unsafe and untested technology is what I believe is toxic to our health. It's similar to the asbestos crisis that was in the 1900s. For example, there were a wide range of symptoms that people had. Now, not everybody has the same symptoms from you know, the radiation that comes from small towers that will be spread throughout the residential area. But the doctors didn't know what was wrong with people, and all they could do was tell them to go home and rest, and they kept getting worse and worse symptoms and even life-threatening diseases. So this is similar, this electromagnetic radiation is similar. And what it's doing, it doesn't just kill us all at once, but what happens is it affects the cells, because the cells in our body have electric current that actually make calcium and other ingredients, and other vitamins and other things go into the cell. And what happens is that this disrupts the gate that allows calcium and other ingredients to go into the cell. So it's not an immediate disaster, let's say, but long-term it will affect every one of us as we experience more of these cell towers going into neighborhoods. So I hope that you can protect the unborn, the children, the elderly, myself included, and all citizens to thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McGlynn, item 15.1.
Item 15.1, public hearing authorizing submittal of the fiscal year 2019-20 action plan and approval of grant agreements for the Public Services Fair Housing and Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, HOPWA. Nancy Manchester, Program Specialist, presenting.
So good evening, Mayor Schwedhelm, members of the council. The item before you today is required by HUD in order to receive our federal allocations of CDBG, home, and HOPWA funds. And we are asking you to conduct a public hearing on the annual federal action plan, to authorize submittal of the plan no later than May 15th to HUD, and to approve the funding recommendations brought before you. So by way of background, HUD requires the annual plan to define how federal funds will be spent and to identify the housing and community development needs, priorities, and goals and strategies. It's written using a template that's provided by HUD, and it's based on the most recent 2016 to 2020 amended consolidated plan. As an aside, the next consolidated plan period runs from 2020 to 2024. It's a 5-year roadmap for how we plan to spend funds over those 5 years. We will be starting that process about June 1st for the next one, and it generally comes to council the following May. Public input for solicitation and consultation begins in January or February of 2020. So the action plan goals, first priority, are to increase the supply of affordable rental housing for low-income households, provide housing assistance and support for low-income households with HIV or AIDS, to preserve the existing affordable housing stock, and to provide housing and services to special needs populations. The second tier goals, which would be implemented if there were increases to the federal funding, would include increasing access to home ownership, providing funding for public facilities and improvements, and promotion of economic development. So here's a chart that shows you the amount of federal funds that we've been allocated for 2019-2020. It totals just under $2.6 million. And you'll see that it notes program income, which is generally provided by repayment of loans that were made by the Housing Authority. The allocations are based on Santa Rosa's demographics. Outreach has been conducted starting in January. We went to 2 community advisory board meetings. We held a community meeting on February 6th. We sent out notifications and solicitations for comments to the Continuum of Care listserv, which has 250 organizations and individuals that subscribe to it. There have been social and traditional media announcements that solicited comments on the plan and publicized the public hearing for tonight, as well as encouraging additional comments up until tonight. The plan was available for comment starting March 15th through April 15th online and at 3 physical locations. But we've also encouraged ongoing comment up to and including tonight's public hearing through news flash items on the Housing and Community Services webpage and the city's main webpage. And also there was a write-up in the new City Connections newsletter for May. We did receive an increase in comments this year over prior years. Public comments that we've received to date have been included in the draft plan, and any comments that we receive tonight will be included in the plan prior to us submitting it to HUD. So the annual funding that we're asking you to approve tonight, first off is CDBG. Up to 15% of our CDBG allocation can be used for public services. The remainder of the funds are used for affordable housing purposes, the remainder of the CDBG allocation, and some admin time as well. So the public services funding was made, or the recommendation is being made using council's direction to provide focused, comprehensive homeless services through coordinated entry operation of facilities. And the recommendation is to fund proposals that most closely meet that direction. So we are recommending $96,460 for Family Support Center, $102,520 for the Homeless Services Center, both operated by Catholic Charities. The HSC, or Homeless Services Center funding, helps support intake for the city-owned Samuel Jones Hall. Fair housing is a federally mandated program. The criteria for award is responsiveness to the 2012 Sonoma County Analysis of Impediments to Fair Housing, also called the AI. We're recommending that Fair Housing of Northern California receive funding for $36,000 from the general fund, and the AI update process has begun. That happens in conjunction with the consolidated plan 2020 to 2024. And we have already begun collaborating with the CDC, the county, the Home Sonoma County, and Petaluma. The CDC and Petaluma are the other 2 federal entitlement jurisdictions in our area. HOPWA funding, we're receiving a federal grant of $437,814, recommending funding Face-to-Face, who's provided this program to us since we've had the program, in the amount of $424,680. The balance of the funds is used by the city for administration. And just as a note, the city received the HUD allocation for HOPWA for the first time in 2016, and we provide services, or we use that funding to provide services throughout the county to low-income families with HIV or AIDS. So just a review of the annual results of our federal funds. The most recent annual report is for 2017-2018. It's called a CAPER, Consolidated Annual Performance Evaluation Report. That showed that we served 1,519 homeless individuals during that year with the public services funding. That would be both FSC and HSC. And for the HOPWA CAPER, we provided 74 households with housing subsidy assistance, 350 households with supportive services, and 203 households with housing information. The CAPER for 18-19 will start getting put together as soon as the fiscal year is over. So those results will go on the city's website, and then we'll do also a public outreach process to solicit comments on that. Generally, that happens in early September. And Fair Housing's mission is to reduce discriminatory housing activities through complaint intake, training, testing, counseling, renter seminars, and higher visibility of the program. And you'll see that the population served by the program is 67% of those families are very low income. So that includes extremely low income and very low income. Testing has revealed some differential treatment in Santa Rosa based on race and disability status. There's ongoing monitoring of these properties and education of landlords as well. And finally, the recommendation. It is recommended by the Housing and Community Services Department that the council, by resolution, authorize submittal of the fiscal year 2019-2020 action plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, approve the fiscal year 2019-2020 grant agreements for public services, fair housing, and HOPWA funds in the estimated total amount of $659,660, authorize the Director of Housing and Community Services to execute the grant agreements with the service providers, and authorize the city manager to execute the annual federal funding agreements with HUD and any additional forms or documents required by HUD to implement the fiscal year 2019-2020 action plan. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nancy. Council questions? Ms. Combs?
Thank you. Thank you for this report. Appreciate it. Can we get a copy of the, I didn't see it, maybe it's in here and I missed it, fair housing testing results? Can we get that information?
Yes, we could provide that to you.
Thank you. I would very much like to have that. Does this funding in any way coordinate or duplicate funding from the new entity that is Home Sonoma, the leadership body? How is this related to the funding there? Not related at all.
Well, there is some coordination between the two entities. Home Sonoma County is the current name for the continuum of care, and some of the funds go to support, for example, the intake for Samuel Jones Hall.
I guess I'm just,
I'm sure
I'm on that leadership body and I'm trying to figure out if these funds are already determined there, or are we determining them here, or will they at some point go? What's up with this?
Yeah, so the three, what HUD refers to as entitlement jurisdictions, Santa Rosa, City of Petaluma, County of Sonoma, all have to run their consolidated planned business. However, to your point, we plan to sit down with the staffs of those two other entities in this coming fiscal year to see how the work of Home Sonoma County, especially the technical advisory committees, and then bringing those to the Home Leadership Council could help inform the council on the programming.
Thank you. That's the answer I was hoping to hear, so I appreciate that. I have this item. Let me know when you want it to go.
So any other questions? Because I have a couple. So on that same light, Dave, is it a HUD mandate that this body make these decisions, or could this body say we're okay with these decisions being made by the Leadership Council? Whose decision is that?
I would have to research the HUD regs. Right now, these resources come straight to the city of Santa Rosa, as you know. So we would have to get back to you on an answer if that HUD would allow you to transfer your decision-making authority to another legislative entity.
So that would be, because I think the county, the city of Petaluma, and the city of Santa Rosa regionalized this effort. I would like to know the answer to that to see if we do have a say in that matter.
It seems that your two primary options would be, does that body inform your decision, or do you transfer your decision to that body?
Exactly, because I think that will be a topic of discussion with the Leadership Council. What do we mean by regionalization? Okay. A couple other questions I had. Some of the metrics that I saw here, for like example on Exhibit A, the scope of services, did we create that document? And again, I'm thinking knowing what we just approved with our metrics and be a little bit more specific. For instance, on the scope of services for the HOPWA funding, planned indicators towards a successful program outcome will include low rate of movement from permanent housing into homelessness. How do we know if we're doing that? What's a low rate of movement? And I guess my question would be, I know we have the 2016 to 2020 consolidated plan. At what point do we try to identify some specific metrics? Because I didn't read in, I think, any of the reports, are we ending homelessness with any of these funds? Kind of what we heard, again, with our different tiers. We're looking for our investments paying off in ending homelessness. And I didn't see that in any of these documents.
I have Sylvia Alejandre here, and she is from Face to Face, our HOPWA service provider, so she can answer the specific question around HOPWA.
So the specific question would be on the scope of service. Who creates the scope of service for these HOPWA funds?
So it comes down to basically from HUD on what we can spend monies on for our clients, and we work with the city and the county identifying homeless clients and working with them for Shelter Plus Care vouchers when those become available. So through coordinated intake, we're all counting on and tracking what's happening to the homeless clients that we are directing to that, and we can then track how many have gotten a voucher, how many have gotten shelter, and continue through our tracking of them. And we continue doing care services for our clients, so we are able to know what and how long they stay on a voucher program. Does that answer your question?
Not really. What I'm looking for is specific numbers. So again, if you, one of the other bullet points for the indicators of success, movement from homelessness into housing of people living with HIV/AIDS. How many are we hoping to experience that bullet point? Is there a goal for this funding?
I don't know if we have an annual goal. We have a number, we could look at how many clients we start with that are homeless, and at the end of the year be able to tell you how many of those clients that are homeless have either received housing or a housing and a voucher. So we would be able to do that. I wouldn't be able to right now.
Right, and I'm not asking, so, and maybe more for staff. So if we wanted to have, just like the last exercise we did with tiers, about this is the number we're going for, we need everyone in our organization focus on ending homelessness with this funding for fill in the blank. How would we get some of those actual numbers put in there versus generic low rate of movement, you know?
Yeah, we take, the scope of work, for example, is a collaboration between the service provider's proposal of what they think is achievable, and then reviewed by staff, and then there's a collaboration that goes on to determine what is achievable during the process of a year. And we receive quarterly reports that show us what kind of progress is being made.
So I guess my request would be having those numbers in the scope of work. This is the goal that we're going for, not just more generic. We're moving in the right direction, because again, with limited dollars, I'm a big proponent. We should be investing our dollars where it's most effective on ending homelessness. And I guess this scope of service doesn't appear as though that's the laser focus that I think we need to do with the limited resources.
We can certainly develop that in this year's scope of services.
Okay, and then on the same light, on each of the exhibits for all the funded agencies, it talks about oversight into the HMIS system. What I've heard through the System on Leadership Council, one of the challenges is the data input into that. What role do the City of Santa Rosa employees as the oversight do to manage or to verify that the people inputting the data into HMIS are doing it in an efficient and effective manner?
We get the quarterly reports, but we don't oversee how the data is being inputted as part of any monitoring.
Because with the scope of service, I think that's one of the responsibilities of this funding, make sure they're participating in HMIS. again, one of the complaints I've heard, it's my understanding, there's over 300 folks, I don't know if it's HMIS or coordinated entry, are doing the data entry. And to me, that's a key point, that the data that we're asking, that we did, again, with our tiers, if the data input is not as effective and as efficient as we'd hope, the outcomes that we're all looking for, we're not going to be able to measure that. So I guess I'm just interested, because I thought I read it in each of the scope of services, that's one of our roles, is the oversight of that HMIS. Is anyone checking to see how they are entering it, and is it being entered in the most efficient and effective way?
Understood.
And then the last thing I had on one of the exhibits from, it was the Catholic Charities one, where there was a figure of 37% of families will exit to permanent housing, which exceeds 36% countywide averages. When we're using figures such as, how do we come up with 37% of families? Is it one more percentage than what we have with the county average? This is in Exhibit A, Family Support Center.
I would have to look into that and get back to you.
If we could, it just seemed like that stood out, because the other ones are general percentages, but this just happens to be 1 more % than what the county average is. And it's like, are we pushing ourselves hard enough? It just seems kind of, that just stood out for me a little bit. Okay, those are the only questions I have. Anyone else have questions? Please, Ms. Combs.
I would follow up with, we have had conversations in the past that we look at the reporting back to us piece of contracts with a number of service providers, and it's not clear to me now whether that responsibility will go to the home Sonoma or whether it will come here. But I do have some concerns to make sure that in our contracts we're clear about wanting data report outs, either here or there, that we can bring to here. How do we make sure that as we move this forward, we do that?
So I think that that's one of the tier 1 priorities, was to actually examine this whole contracting process and make sure there was consistency applied, and the goal for that is the completion of the following fiscal year. So I think that is built into the tier 1 priorities in this conversation.
That's on our calendar for the homeless stuff that's coming over the next year. Thank you.
Okay, I have one card on this item, George Uberti.
All right.
Yes,
Spoken on a lot of lists before, but
this is a public hearing, so if you open the public
yeah, you eat my time now.
Thank you, Madam City Attorney. I'll open up this public hearing. Go ahead, George.
3 minutes, there we go. All right, so this is going to HUD. I've spoken on these things before, but let's make sure we hit all the marks. The City of Santa Rosa Public Housing Authority, they have a budget in 2016 of $144 million. That budget is not audited. It expressly says so on that budget, right? It's in violation of federal contract law. Now, in addition to that, 99% of that $144 million is caught up in loans. You all referenced it when you referred to program income, right? That program income is a very, very small fraction of the amount of money that is actually loaned out. So the money, which we don't need to make money off the money that we have, that money is for administering services. It's not for lending out to people for a small percentage, of which 1 or 2% of the actual money that we get to provide services through housing and urban development to house and develop this city, which instead we lend it out to people who are already rich, builders, and then take this fraction of interest and then use that for program services. That is 100% not how that money is supposed to be spent, and all of you know it. In addition to that, Catholic Charities, they're awarded federal funds in excess of $500,000, right? Their chief financial officer, Marilyn Stewart, not a certified public accountant, in direct violation of federal contract law. Right? In addition to that, when I went to go get their independently audited financial statements, which they are required to produce on an annual basis, I was personally told by their CFO, who is not a CPA, that they would not match their Form 990s, which means that either they are lying to the IRS or they are lying to their independent auditor. But the same documents, they're meant to account for the same financial information. So 2 different accounts of the same financial information mean that there's a lie being told. Let's see, in addition to that, the HOPWA funding. I noticed the drafts you looked at. I was happy because they were the direct inverse of the information that I came up and presented here, which is on February 22nd of 2018, which showed you all spending 3.61% of your HOPWA funding on actual housing services, with the rest of it going to administration, right? And in direct violation of the caps, specifically of 10 and 15% that were put on those amounts, right? Something very similar is done with the CAPER, the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, in which instead of spending this money on what it was meant to be spent for, you basically put three categories, you lump them together. So we'll have, money spent for actually housing, 0, right? Money spent for, one or two of the other marks that you're supposed to hit, 0. Money spent for this, 3,000 times what we were supposed to spend it for. If you average those all together, oh, look, we're doing great. But you're not doing great. You're deliberately manipulating these figures so that you can not spend this money on what it was meant to be spent for, and that's a crime, and it has to stop.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. You don't have to fill out a card. Would anyone else like to address the council on this item? Seeing no one rise, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Combs, you have this item.
Resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Rosa authorizing submittal of the fiscal year 2019-2020 action plan to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, and approving grant agreements for public services, fair housing, and housing opportunities for persons with AIDS, also known as HOPWA, and waive further reading of the text.
We have a motion and a second. Your votes, please. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Mr. McGlynn, item 15.2.
Item 15.2, public hearing, Rochinelli rezoning map amendment, 1250 Mendocino Avenue, REZ 19-002, Kristen A. Tumains presenting.
Thank you, Mayor Schwedhelm, members of the council, Kristen A. Tumains from the Planning Division. This is the item before you is the Ron Kelly rezoning at 1250 Mendocino Avenue.
Ron Kelly.
The application is for the Ron Kelly rezoning, which proposes to rezone a property from its current dual zoning of CG General Commercial and R315 zoning districts to CG General Commercial zoning district. Here's the property aerial. You can see it's developed with a commercial building smack in the center. It has dual frontage on Mendocino Avenue and Slater Street. On this general plan and zoning map, you can see the zoning boundary line that crosses virtually the midpoint of the length of that parcel. The front half, the Mendocino Avenue frontage is zoned general commercial, and the back half is zoned R315. R315 is meant for single family residential development. The general plan designation is retail and business services. The requested rezoning would bring the zoning in conformance with the underlying general plan designation. Pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15183I, no additional environmental review is required when rezoning for general plan consistency. And with that, the Planning and Economic Development Department and the Planning Commission by resolution recommend that the council adopt an ordinance to rezone a property located at 1250 Mendocino Avenue, assessor parcel number 180-590-004, from the CG General Commercial and R315 Single Family Residential Zoning Districts to the CG General Commercial Zoning District. And the applicant, staff is available for questions. The applicant is also here to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. Council, any questions? Mr. Vice Mayor.
Just to make sure, so this went already through the Planning Commission?
That's correct.
What was the vote of the Planning Commission, and were there any comments on this item?
It was a unanimous vote to recommend approval to the City Council.
Okay, and was there much public input on it?
There was one a neighboring tenant that attended the meeting, and she had concerns about any potential development on the property if it were to be a commercial type development.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Combs?
Thank you, Mayor. Can you explain to me the outreach that was done to the junior college neighborhood with regard to this item? Did the president of the Junior College Neighborhood Association get a notice whether or not they lived within so many feet, or, you know, what did we do with regard to notice to the junior college neighborhood? I've had them come and speak strongly about things that happened on Mendocino Avenue, so I just want to make sure that they knew what was going on.
So both for the Planning Commission meeting and tonight's meeting, staff sent out a notice of public hearing to all property owners within 400 feet. We utilized the new noticing postcards that are supposed to be more eye-catching. And
they are.
The applicant also installed an on-site sign. The secretaries for both the Planning Commission and City Council send out an email blast to everybody who's signed up to or subscribed to the email mailing list. So those blasts did go out to anybody who was interested. And also there was a notice in the Press Democrat newspaper.
And with our need for housing as a priority for our community, is there a reason why we're talking about this in terms of converting to commercial when we're really wanting to build housing?
So the CG zoning district does allow for multifamily residential development. In fact, it's a permitted use. It allows for up to 30 dwelling units per acre to be developed on the site. It's also in a priority development area. So if someone were to bring forward a request for multifamily, they would only be subject to zoning administrator level design review.
Thank you.
Mr. Tibbetts.
Thank you, Mayor. I move an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Rosa amending Title 20 of the Santa
We're not quite ready for that. I haven't even opened the public hearing yet. So do you have any other questions? Does anyone have any other? Ms. Fleming.
Thank you. I don't have a question. I have a comment. Is that okay through the mayor? Or would you prefer that I
prefer if you have questions. If not, I'll open up the public hearing and we'll do comments after. See no one with questions. This is a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing. You don't have to fill out a card, but we do have our one card. Ann Seeley.
Take your time, Ann.
Thank you. Good evening, Council, Mayor and Council. Ann Seeley speaking for Concerned Citizens for Santa Rosa, which is now 33 years old. I want to just say that this seems like a very simple administrative matter, but I think there are a couple of things you should strongly consider. We are always looking for housing opportunity sites. To eliminate them is a serious problem, a serious question. This site also is right across the street from the high school and the junior college. The junior college is desperately in need of housing, of affordable housing opportunities in proximity to the college. I think it's a step back to eliminate the housing opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Would anyone else like to make any comments to the council? Please, sir, if you could identify yourself.
Good evening, Council. My name is Mike Masnick. I'm actually the representative for the Roncalli family. We are the commercial listing agents on the property. One of the reasons we're requesting a rezoning to general commercial is we have found that general commercial is actually more laxed with regard to multifamily development on the property. That's how we've been marketing the property, and that's what initiated the general conversation for rezoning. So there's nothing in development at this point, but that is a consideration on why the application was presented to the council.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to make comment? Seeing none, close the public hearing. Mr. Tibbetts, I think you have this item. Okay. We'll have comments after the motion.
I move an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Rosa amending Title 20 of the Santa Rosa City Code, reclassification of property located at 1250 Mendocino Avenue, APN 180-590-004 to the Commercial General Zoning District, file number REZ19-002, and waive further reading of the text.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments? Ms. Fleming.
Yes. This is a great example of staff doing outreach and the Open Government Task Force working. I represent the junior college neighborhood, and nothing gets by my constituents without, this is a fantastic example of you guys doing your job really well. And I just want to be super clear that, we have engaged residents and they would be howling if they if they had a problem with it. So kudos to you.
Any other comments? Ms. Combs? Do you have a comment? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I wasn't sure who you had said. Thank you, and I want to thank the property owner for strong interest in multifamily housing, and hope that we see multifamily housing coming out of this project. I really appreciate it. I understand that it's not mandatory, but I do appreciate seeing that opportunity come forward.
Great. Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Your votes, please. And that passes unanimously, 7-0. Item 15.3, we're rescheduling. No written communication. Do we have any additional public comments? Nope, meeting adjourned.
Chris Wright.